Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was a descender wielding the lost element of Leaf. Naruto x Raiden Shogun Genshin Impact. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. A World of Stillness and Storms. The world returned to him not in a gentle dawn, but in a violent, percussive symphony of chaos. The first sensation was water, a brutal, invasive cold that filled his lungs and stole the air he hadn't yet realized he was desperate for. His body, a dead weight in the churning abyss, was seized by a violent spasm. He coughed, ejecting a torrent of saltwater that burned his throat, the act a raw, primal declaration of existence. Air, sharp and tasting of salt and ozone, rushed in to fill the void. It was the most exquisite pain he had ever known. His eyes cracked open to a maelstrom. The sky was a bruised canvas of slate gray and angry violet, torn asunder by jagged fissures of lightning. Rain, thick as nails, hammered down with a relentless fury, blurring the distinction between sea and sky. The sea itself was a living entity, a monstrous, thrashing beast of black water and frothing white crests. He was clinging to something, a shard of splintered wood, slick and treacherous in his grasp. It was the ghost of a boat, a testament to a battle with the waves that had already been lost. Memory was a tattered tapestry, full of holes and frayed edges. He knew his name, Naruto. The name felt solid, a single stone foundation in the ruin of his mind. He knew the feel of combat, the weight of responsibility, the phantom ache of old wounds. He knew faces, voices, 1,000 techniques that now felt like distant echoes in a hollow chamber. But how he had come to be here, in this apocalypse of wind and water, was a gaping void. There was a sense of immense power, a cataclysmic release. A feeling of being torn apart and stitched back together incorrectly. The last concrete thought he could grasp was a desperate, self-sacrificial charge against an enemy of impossible, divine stature. After that, only the tearing, the falling, the cold. Another wave, a liquid mountain with a hungry, foaming maw, crested over him. He held his breath, his knuckles white on the piece of flotsam, and allowed the ocean to have its way. The pressure was immense, a world of silent, violent green. He didn't fight it, he flowed with it, an instinct honed in 100 battles. When the world broke surface again, gasping, he saw him. An old man, his face a roadmap of weathered lines and sun-baked leather, was tangled in the remnants of a fishing net, his body lashed to a larger, more stable section of the ruined hull. His eyes were closed, his lips tinged with blue, his chest unnervingly still. He was dying, or perhaps, already dead. A strange impulse, deeper and more profound than any conscious thought, surged through Naruto. It wasn't chakra. The familiar, warm network that had been his lifeblood was gone, replaced by something else. This new energy was centered in his solar plexus. A core of quiescent, golden warmth that felt ancient and fundamentally alive. It didn't need hand seals or vocal commands. It simply needed his will. He let go of his own piece of wreckage, his muscles screaming in protest as he fought the churning water, kicking his way towards the old man. The distance was only a few meters, but it was a journey across a battlefield of hostile peaks and valleys. He reached the hull section, his fingers finding purchase on the splintered wood. He hauled himself closer, his face inches from the old fisherman's. There was no breath, no pulse beneath the cold, wet skin of his neck. Naruto placed a hand on the man's chest. He closed his eyes, not to concentrate, but to listen. To listen to the silence where a heartbeat should be. And then, he pushed. Not with physical strength, but with that nascent, golden core within him. He willed it to flow, to move from his center, down his arm, and into the still flesh beneath his palm. The effect was instantaneous and utterly bizarre. A soft, warm light, the color of honeyed sunlight at dusk, bloomed from his hand. It was not a harsh glare, but a gentle, pervasive luminescence that seemed to soak into the man's skin. The wood of the hull beneath them groaned, not in protest, but as if it were stretching after a long sleep. Tiny, phosphorescent green shoots, no bigger than threads, sprouted from the waterlogged timber, unfurling delicate leaves in the midst of the raging storm. The very water around them seemed to calm, the chaotic thrashing lessening into a gentler swell. Under his palm, Naruto felt a flicker. A single, weak, defiant thump. He pushed more of the golden energy into the man, and the light intensified. The blue tint receded from the fisherman's lips, replaced by a healthier pink. The man's chest rose in a sudden, sharp gasp, his eyes flying open in bewildered terror. He stared at the glowing hand on his chest, then at Naruto's face, a mask of intense concentration. The changes weren't confined to the man. The section of the hull they were on was visibly knitting itself back together. Splintered planks fused, their edges glowing with golden seams before settling into solid wood. Ropes, frayed and torn, wove themselves anew. A shattered mast began to reform, rising from its stump like a time-lapsed tree. Naruto felt the energy flowing out of him, a rent of pure vitality that he commanded with instinct alone. It was creation. It was restoration. It was life. He named it in his heart, a whisper of a word that felt as true as his own name, Seimei. The storm, as if its fury was no match for this quiet miracle, began to recede. The hammering rain softened to a persistent drizzle. The violet sky bled into a uniform gray, and the monstrous waves subsided into a rolling, gray swell. The old fisherman, now breathing steadily, simply stared, his mouth agape, at the impossible sight of his boat rebuilding itself around him. Within minutes, what had been a collection of wreckage was a small, seaworthy vessel, its sails tattered but its hull whole. Naruto pulled his hand back, a wave of profound exhaustion washing over him. The golden core within him felt diminished, but not empty. It was like a well, deep and replenishing. He slumped against the newly formed mast, the drizzle cool on his face. The old man, whose name was Koji, finally found his voice. It was a hoarse, trembling whisper. What are you? A god, a spirit? Naruto offered a small, tired smile. Just a lucky survivor, he said, his own voice raspy. I think we saved each other. He looked out at the horizon. Where a sliver of land was visible beneath the oppressive gray sky, a silhouette of jagged cliffs and strangely shaped trees. Where are we? Koji, still looking at his own hands as if to confirm they were real, followed his gaze. That's Rito, he said, his voice laced with a mixture of awe and something that sounded like dread. The gateway to Inazuma, the journey to Rito was made in a stunned, surreal silence. Koji, a man who had spent 60 years on the sea and thought he had seen all its mysteries, could not reconcile the storm-tossed nightmare with the calm, golden-eyed young man who had literally breathed life back into his body and his boat. Naruto, for his part, was focused inward, probing the new energy within him. Seimei. It felt like an extension of his own life force. Magnified 1,000 times, it responded to his will, his emotions. When he had felt the desperate need to save Koji, it had answered. It was a power of profound goodness. Yet he could feel a dangerous edge to it, a hint that what can be created can also be unmade. As they neared the island, the atmosphere shifted. The very air grew heavy, charged with a strange, static tension. The architecture was foreign, a style of elegant, sloping roofs and dark wood that spoke of a culture both refined and severe. But it was the port itself that was most unsettling. It was a bottleneck, a choke point teeming with foreign merchants in a state of anxious waiting, their ships moored in the harbor, sails furled. Samurai, clad in intimidating purple and black armor, led the docks with an air of absolute authority, their hands never far from the hilts of their katanas. The flag of a stylized, three-tomo crest flew from every official building, a constant, watchful eye. Koji navigated his miraculously restored boat to a small, secluded dock used by local fishermen, his movements furtive. You must be careful here, young man, he whispered, his earlier awe replaced by a nervous urgency. Things are tense. The Shogun's decrees are absolute. The Vision Hunt decree has closed us off. No one enters, no one leaves, without the Kanju Commission's permission. Naruto's brow furrowed. Vision Hunt decree. The words meant nothing to him, but the fear in the old man's voice was a universal language. They are seizing them. The blessings of the gods. From anyone, Koji said, his voice dropping further. He pressed a small pouch of coins into Naruto's hand. It wasn't much, but Naruto could feel the weight of the gesture. This is all I have. You saved my life. It is the least I can do. Go to the main checkpoint, try to apply for a permit. Be respectful. Be patient. Do not draw attention. Naruto accepted the pouch with a nod of thanks. I will. You stay safe, Koji. The old man simply nodded. His eyes wide with a gratitude that needed no more words, and quickly began unloading his meager, storm-tossed catch. Walking into the main plaza of Rito was like stepping into a finely crafted cage. The air was thick with frustration and quiet desperation. Foreign merchants argued in hushed, angry tones with stern-faced officials in elaborate robes. Every transaction seemed to involve a hefty, unofficial, processing fee. It was a system built on extortion, thriving under the umbrella of isolationism. Naruto, with his strange, bright orange and black clothing, what was left of it, and his sun-kissed blonde hair, stood out like a flame in a dark room. He immediately drew the attention of two samurai from the Kanju Commission. They approached him. They gained a swagger of practiced intimidation. You are not from here, the first one said. It wasn't a question. His hand was already resting on his sword. Your papers, your travel permit. I don't have any, Naruto replied calmly. His eyes taking in their posture, the way their feet were planted, the slight tension in their shoulders. They were trained, but sloppy. Overconfident. My ship was destroyed in the storm. I washed ashore. The second samurai sneered. A likely story. Another illegal trying to sneak into Inazuma. The fee for lost paperwork is 500,000 mora. Payable now. Naruto looked at the meager pouch of coins Koji had given him. It might contain a few thousand, at best. He met the samurai's gaze, his own expression unreadable. I don't have that kind of money. A pity, the first samurai said, his grip tightening on his katana. Then we will have to detain you indefinitely for processing. You will find the cost of board and lodging to be substantial. It was a threat, plain and simple. They were going to throw him in a cell and bleed him dry for whatever he had. Naruto gave a slow, deliberate sigh. He had hoped to follow Koji's advice. To be patient, but patience had its limits. And extortion was a line. Look, he said, his voice dropping slightly, losing its earlier casualness and gaining a hard, steely edge. I've had a very bad day. I am tired, I am sore. And I am in no mood for this game. You can either point me towards the person who can actually help me, or you can get out of my way. Your choice. The shift in his demeanor was so abrupt it took the samurai by surprise. The air around him seemed to thicken, the casual survivor vanishing, replaced by something far older and more dangerous. The first samurai, his authority challenged, bristled with anger. Insolent whelp, you dare threaten an officer of the Kanju Commission. He began to draw his sword, the rasp of steel cutting through the muted sounds of the plaza. He never cleared the scabbard. Naruto moved with a speed that was a blur to the eye. In one fluid motion, he closed the distance. He didn't strike. He didn't punch. His left hand shot out and clamped down on the samurai's wrist. His fingers finding the precise pressure points. The samurai's hand went numb, his grip on his sword failing instantly. Simultaneously, Naruto's right hand gently tapped the man's scabbard, pushing the half-drawn sword back into its sheath with an audible click. The second samurai, seeing his partner neutralized, roared and drew his own blade, swinging it in a wide, clumsy arc aimed at Naruto's neck. Naruto didn't even seem to look at him. Still holding the first samurai's wrist, he pivoted on his heel, the movement economical and graceful. The swinging blade passed harmlessly through the space where his head had been a fraction of a second before. As he turned, his leg swept out, hooking behind the second samurai's ankle. It wasn't a powerful kick, but a perfectly timed trip. The samurai, overbalanced by his own momentum, went down with a surprised yelp, landing flat on his back with a loud clatter of armor. The wind was knocked out of him, his katana flying from his grasp and skittering across the stone plaza. Naruto released the first samurai's wrist, giving him a gentle shove backwards. The man stumbled, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. Two armed and armored samurai, neutralized in under 3 seconds without a single blow being landed. The entire plaza had gone silent. The hushed arguments had ceased. Every eye, merchant, official, and citizen, was fixed on Naruto. He stood over the groaning samurai on the ground, his expression one of mild disappointment. I said, he repeated, his voice now carrying across the silent square, get out of my way. He bent down, picked up the fallen samurai's katana, and held it out to him, hilt first. The man on the ground stared at the offered weapon, then at Naruto's face, and saw no malice, no anger. Only an unnerving, absolute confidence. He scrambled to his feet, snatched his sword, and both he and his partner backed away, their bravado shattered, replaced by a very healthy dose of fear. Naruto turned, his gaze sweeping across the stunned officials. "Now," he said, his voice calm but brooking no argument. "Who do I talk to about getting a permit to travel to Inazuma City?" An older, higher-ranking official, his face pale, hurried forward, bowing low. "My lord, my sincerest apologies for the misunderstanding. My subordinates were overzealous. Please, come this way. We will arrange your paperwork immediately. No charge, of course, no charge at all." As Naruto followed the groveling official, the whispers that erupted behind him were not of a criminal, but of something else entirely. They spoke of his impossible speed, his strange clothes, and the unnerving calm in his golden blue eyes. The name, Golden Ghost, had not yet been coined, but its legend was being born in the stifling, corrupt air of Rito. He left Rito an hour later, a freshly stamped permit in hand and the wary, fearful gazes of the Kanju Commission on his back. He had no destination in mind, only a desire to put the oppressive port behind him. He followed a path that wound its way up from the coast, through fields dotted with strange, lavender-colored melons and trees with trunks that twisted into unnatural shapes. The land was beautiful, yet there was a deep melancholy to it, a sense of resigned sadness that seemed to seep from the very soil. He walked for hours, the lingering exhaustion from his use of seime a dull ache in his bones. As dusk began to settle, casting long shadows across the landscape, he found himself on a high road overlooking the sprawling capital. Inazuma City. It was a magnificent sight, a metropolis of towering pagodas and grand estates, all centered around a colossal palace that pierced the heavens. A soft, ambient purple light pulsed from the city's heart, a constant, electric hum that he could feel in his teeth. It was beautiful, but it was a cold beauty. A beauty of strict order and unyielding control. As he watched, his enhanced senses picked up a commotion from a street below. Shouts, a woman's cry of despair, the arrogant commands of soldiers, curiosity, and a deeper, more ingrained instinct to intervene, pulled him from the main road. He moved through the trees, silent as a shadow, until he could peer down into a small, lantern-lit square. The scene was stark and cruel. A young woman, a weaver by the look of her ink-stained hands and the simple artisan's clothes she wore, was on her knees, pleading. Before her stood 4 soldiers, their armor bearing the same crest as the ones in Rito, but their demeanor was colder, more militant. They were Tenryo Commission. One of them held a small, glowing gem, a deep amethyst color, that pulsed with a faint inner light. The gem had clearly been pried from a decorative hairpin that now lay broken on the ground. "Please," the woman wept, her hands outstretched. "Don't take it. It was a gift from my master. It is my inspiration. I cannot work without it. Please." The lead soldier sneered, his face illuminated by the glow of the gem in his hand. Inspiration is a luxury the shogun has deemed unnecessary. All visions are to be inlaid upon the statue of the omnipresent God. It is the instrument of her will, the key to her eternity. Your ambition is forfeit. Be grateful for the stillness you are being granted. Vision. So this was a vision. The source of Koji's fear. And they were simply taking it. He could feel the energy within the stone, a focused, potent concentration of elemental power. But he could also feel the connection between it and the woman. It was a part of her, an external manifestation of her soul, her drive. To take it was to hollow her out. As the soldier turned to leave, the light in the vision flickered and died. The effect on the woman was immediate and horrific. The color drained from her face, her eyes glazing over with a vacant, empty stare. Her hands, which had been reaching out in desperation, fell limply to her sides. All her passion, her fire, her life, seemed to have been snuffed out like a candle flame. She remained kneeling, a living statue, her memories and personality wiped clean, leaving only an empty shell. Naruto felt a surge of cold fury. This wasn't justice. This wasn't order. This was theft of the soul. It was a perversion of everything he understood about life and will. The warm, golden core of Seimei inside him roiled, not with a desire to heal, but with a righteous, protective anger. He dropped from the ledge, landing as softly as a falling leaf in the center of the square. The 4 soldiers spun around, their hands flying to their weapons, startled by his sudden appearance. "Give it back to her," Naruto said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the evening air with the chilling finality of a blade. The lead soldier looked him up and down, taking in the strange attire and foreign features. "Who are you? This is official business of the Tenryou Commission. Move along, or you will be arrested for obstruction." "I'm not going to say it again," Naruto said, taking a slow step forward. The air around him began to shimmer, not with killing intent, but with an overwhelming, oppressive aura of pure vitality. The lanterns in the square seemed to glow brighter. Small, forgotten weeds in the cracks of the cobblestones began to grow at an alarming rate, their leaves unfurling in the golden light that was beginning to emanate from his body. The soldiers hesitated, unnerved by the unnatural phenomenon. "What is this sorcery?" one of them stammered. "Your last chance," Naruto said, his eyes, now glowing with a soft, golden light, fixed on the stolen vision. The lead soldier, driven by arrogance and dogma, made his choice. "Arrest him," he commanded, drawing his spear. As they charged, Naruto didn't move to engage them. He raised a hand, palm open, and the Seimei within him answered his fury. Golden light exploded from him, not as a concussive blast, but as a wave of tangible life force. It wasn't hot or destructive. It was overwhelmingly, suffocatingly alive. The charging soldiers stopped dead, their expressions slack-jawed. Their spears, made of wood and steel, suddenly sprouted leaves and branches, turning into gnarled, miniature trees in their hands. The leather straps of their armor grew soft and supple, sprouting moss. The ground beneath their feet erupted with a carpet of vibrant, golden flowers that wrapped around their ankles. Holding them fast, they were not harmed, but they were completely and utterly pacified, caught in a spontaneous, impossible prison of life. Naruto walked past the stunned soldiers, his golden aura casting long, dancing shadows. He stopped before the leader and gently plucked the dull, lifeless vision from his unresisting fingers. He knelt before the hollowed-out woman, his expression softening from cold anger to a deep, profound empathy. He held the vision in one hand and placed his other on her forehead. He closed his eyes and pushed a delicate, precise thread of Seimei into her. It was not the torrent he had used on the soldiers, but a gentle, probing current of warmth. He felt for the void within her, the severed connection, the stolen ambition. He found the fray, tethers of her spirit and began to weave them back together, using his own life force as the thread. Then he brought the vision to her forehead, letting his energy flow through it. The dull gray stone began to flicker with light once more. The deep amethyst color returned, brighter and more vibrant than before. Color flooded back into the woman's face. Her eyes blinked, the vacant stare replaced by confusion. Then dawning horror as the memory of what had just happened returned to her. She looked at the glowing vision, then at Naruto's kind, glowing eyes, and tears of gratitude streamed down her face. It was in that moment of quiet, miraculous restoration that a new presence made itself known. A voice, sharp and disciplined as a blade's edge, cut through the air. "By order of the Raiden Shogun, you are under arrest for assaulting soldiers of the Tenryou Commission and interfering with the Vision Hunt Decree." Naruto stood, turning to face the source of the voice. The rain, which had held off, began to fall again, a steady, rhythmic drumming that slicked the cobblestones and reflected the lantern light. Standing at the edge of the square was a woman who seemed carved from the storm itself. She was tall and imposing, her presence a whirlwind of contained power. Long, black hair was tied back in a severe, practical style. A fearsome, crimson Tengu mask was affixed to the side of her head, and her piercing golden eyes held a fanatic's devotion and a general's authority. She was clad in a variation of the shogunate armor, but hers was finer, more ornate, signifying high rank. In her hands, she held a raven-feathered bow, and the very air around her crackled with the sharp, clean scent of electro-energy. This was no mere soldier. This was a force of nature. "I am Kuju Sera, general of the Tenryou Commission," she announced, her voice unwavering despite the impossible scene before her. "You will surrender your person and the illegal vision you hold. There will be no further warnings." Naruto looked from the formidable general to the weeping but whole woman behind him, then back. He gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "No," he said simply. Kuju Sera's eyes narrowed. "So be it." In an instant, she drew an arrow, nocked it, and fired. It was not a normal arrow. It was a bolt of pure, concentrated lightning that screamed through the air, leaving a trail of purple ozone. Naruto's reaction was pure instinct. He shoved the weaver gently out of the way and spun, his own golden aura flaring defensively. He didn't try to dodge. He met the attack head-on. He thrust his hand forward. A shield of pure, solidified seimei, a disk of shimmering, golden energy, materializing just in time to intercept the lightning bolt. The impact was immense. The sound was a deafening crack of thunder. Purple and gold energy erupted at the point of collision, casting the rain-swept square in a psychedelic, strobing light. The cobblestones beneath Naruto's feet fractured under the strain. He was pushed back a step, his arm trembling from the sheer power of the blast, but his shield held. Kuju Sera's eyes widened fractionally. No one had ever blocked her consecrated arrow before. An unknown element, she mused, her voice a low, dangerous hum as she drew her bow again. You are more than a mere dissident. You are an anomaly, and all anomalies must be erased in the name of eternity. Naruto dispersed his shield, the golden light fading back into his body. He had no weapon. He had no desire to kill, or even to harm. But he would not surrender. He would not allow them to harm that woman again. He settled into a low, ready stance, the rain plastering his blonde hair to his forehead, his golden blue eyes fixed on the general. A strategic retreat was in order, but he had to make an opening first. The golden ghost, born in Rito, was about to earn his name in the heart of Inazuma. In the rain, under the watchful, unmoving gaze of the shogun's palace, A.B. Battle between unyielding stillness and unstoppable life was about to begin. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The heron's plea and the fox's smile. The retreat was not a rout, it was a calculated dissolution into the urban labyrinth. Kuju Sera was a force of singular, destructive power, each arrow a focused lance of lightning, but her attacks were designed for open battlefields and decisive strikes. Naruto, a creature of adaptation and chaos, turned the city itself into his weapon. He flowed through the environment, using the rain-slicked rooftops for unpredictable momentum, the narrow, twisting alleyways to break line of sight, and the very verticality of the city to his advantage. He was not faster than her lightning, but he was more elusive than its source. A well-aimed shower of dislodged roof tiles, a kicked-over cart of daikon radishes, a momentary plunge into the canal that bisected the city. Each action was a paragraph in a rapidly written textbook on guerrilla evasion. He left her fuming in the rain. A general with no army to command and a target who refused to behave like one. He didn't stop until the city was miles behind him, the electric hum of its ambition faded to a distant memory. He found himself at the edge of an ancient, sprawling forest, the likes of which he had never seen. The trees were massive, their bark a pale, almost white color, and their leaves shimmered with a faint, internal luminescence. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, night-blooming flowers, and an almost tangible tranquility. This was Chinju Forest, a place that felt older than the city it bordered. A pocket of serene magic in a land of rigid law. He was wounded, but not grievously. One of Sera's arrows had grazed his side, not penetrating his skin but leaving behind a painful, sizzling burn that smelled of ozone. The energy was foreign, hostile, and his seimei struggled to knit the damaged flesh together, the restorative flow disrupted by the lingering electro-element. The true cost of the evening had been to his energy reserves. The fight with Sera, layered on top of the complete revitalization of the Weaver woman and her vision, had drained the well of his power to a dangerously low level. He felt a profound, bone-deep weariness that no amount of sleep could cure. He found a secluded clearing, hidden from the main path by a congregation of moss-covered, smiling tanuki statues. A small, clear stream gurgled nearby, its water glowing with the same soft light as the leaves overhead. The place felt sacred, untouched by the strife of the nation beyond its borders. Naruto sat by the stream, his back against the cool stone of a statue, and finally allowed himself to breathe. He dipped his hands into the glowing water, and a faint, warm pulse of vitality met his touch. The forest itself was alive in a way he understood, saturated with a natural energy that resonated with his own. Closing his eyes, he focused inward, reaching for the golden core within him. It was a flickering ember now, not the roaring bonfire it had been. He didn't try to force it. Instead, he opened himself to his surroundings, using his sensory abilities not to detect threats, but to simply listen. He let the gentle life force of the forest, the water, the glowing flora, and the sleeping creatures seep into him. He wasn't drawing power from them in a parasitic way, he was harmonizing with them, allowing their ambient vitality to coax his own back to life. Slowly, painstakingly, the ember began to glow brighter. The golden warmth spread through his limbs, soothing the ache in his muscles and quieting the frantic alarm bells in his nervous system. He held his hand over the electrical burn on his side. This time, when he coaxed a thread of same from his fingers, it was stronger, more focused. The golden light enveloped the angry purple scorch mark. There was a faint hiss, like water on hot stone, as the two opposing energies met. For a moment, they warred, a miniature storm on his skin. Then, the restorative, persistent nature of life won out. The electro-energy was not destroyed, but unraveled, neutralized, and dispersed. The scorched skin flaked away, replaced by fresh, unblemished flesh underneath. The healing was complete. He spent the rest of the night in this meditative state, a silent guardian in a forest of gentle spirits. He was aware of every rustle of leaves, every nocturnal creature that scurried past. And he was aware of another presence. It was distant, fleeting, and incredibly skilled at masking itself. A flicker of displaced air, a branch that SWA. Yet a fraction of a second after the wind had passed, a shadow that was infinitesimally darker than those around it. He was being watched. He made no move to acknowledge it, giving no sign that he had detected the observer. In his current state, a confrontation was unwise. He simply filed the information away, another piece in the increasingly complex puzzle of Inazuma. For now, this forest was his sanctuary, and he would accept its peace, even if it came with secrets. The sun was high in the sky when a different kind of visitor arrived. He sensed her long before she appeared, a presence of disciplined control and quiet grace that she barely disturbed the forest's natural harmony. She was not a warrior, yet she moved with a warrior's purpose. She was announced by a single, perfectly uniformed attendant in blue and white, who stopped at the edge of the clearing and bowed so low his forehead nearly touched the ground. "The esteemed golden ghost," the attendant said, his voice a polite, practiced monotone. "My master, Kamisato Ayaka of the Yashura Commission, humbly requests a moment of your time." Naruto opened his eyes. The name meant something. Koji had mentioned the Tri-Commission. This was one of the nation's 3 highest ruling bodies. He looked past the attendant and saw a woman standing just beyond the clearing's edge, partially obscured by the glowing foliage. She carried herself with a poise that was both innate and meticulously cultivated. "If she wishes to speak with me," Naruto said, his voice calm, "she can come here." The attendant flinched slightly at the casual response, but a soft, feminine voice interjected before he could reply. "That is quite all right, Hiroshi. Please, wait on the path." The woman stepped into the clearing, and the forest's gentle light seemed to gather around her. She was the very picture of noble elegance. Her hair was a pale, silvery blue, styled in a pristine bun with long, flowing side locks. Her eyes, a striking shade of blue-gray, held a deep intelligence and a hint of a sorrow that her serene smile could not completely hide. She was dressed in an exquisite kimono-like dress armored with plaits that resembled folded paper. A perfect blend of grace and martial readiness. In her hand, she carried a delicate folded fan. She was a living work of art, but beneath the perfect porcelain exterior, Naruto could sense a will as strong and sharp as tempered steel. This was the Shirasagi Himegimi, the white heron princess of Inazuma. She approached and performed a shallow, flawless bow. "It is an honor to meet you. I am Kamisato Ayaka. I hope I am not disturbing your rest." Her voice was like the tinkling of a wind chime, pleasant and melodic, but every word was chosen with the precision of a master calligrapher. "You're not," Naruto replied. Remaining seated, he gestured to the ground opposite him. "Though I doubt you came all this way just for a chat in the woods." A flicker of surprise crossed her features at his directness. But it was quickly masked by her polite smile. She gracefully knelt, her movements fluid and practiced, tucking her fan away. You are correct. I am here because the Yashara Commission, and indeed many of the people of Inazuma, are in need of a force for change. A need you so dramatically demonstrated last night. The people I saw weren't in need of change. They were in need of a spine, Naruto countered. His tone not unkind. They stood by and watched while that woman's soul was torn out of her. Ayaka's smile faltered, and for the first time, a genuine sadness touched her eyes. Fear is a powerful poison. One that has been administered to our people for a very long time. The Vision Hunt decree is merely the symptom of a deeper sickness, our God's pursuit of a timeless, unchanging eternity. It is an ideal that has stagnant our nation and stifles the ambition of its people. The Yashara Commission works to preserve our culture and serve the people, but we are outmaneuvered by the Tenryou Commission's military might and the Kanju Commission's control of our borders. We resist in small ways, through aid and subterfuge, but we lack a champion. We lack a blade sharp enough to cut through the dogma. And you think I'm that blade? Naruto asked, studying her. She wasn't just asking for help, she was recruiting. This was a political move. I saw the reports from Rito, she said, her voice dropping to a more conspiratorial level. You dismantled the Kanju Commission's extortion racket with contemptuous ease. I have heard the whispers from the city of your clash with General Kuju Sera. You faced her, a being second only to the Shogun in power, and you are sitting here now, alive and whole. You wield an element unknown to Teyvat, a power that creates and restores. You are not just a blade. You are a miracle. Her composure was flawless, but Naruto could sense the desperation coiled beneath it, the immense weight of the burden she carried. She was the head of her clan, the face of a quiet rebellion, and she was playing the most dangerous game of her life. What do you want from me? Naruto asked, cutting to the heart of it. An alliance, she stated plainly. Lend us your strength. With your power, we can protect those targeted by the decree. We can expose the corruption that has taken root in the other commissions. We can force an audience with the Shogun and show her the damage her ideal of eternity is doing to the nation she is meant to protect. We can give the people of Inazuma back their future. She reached into her sleeve and produced a small, folded paper. Placing it on the ground between them. It was an exquisitely crafted map, detailing a hidden residence on the outskirts of the city. This will be your sanctuary. The Yashara Commission will provide you with shelter, resources, and intelligence. In return, we ask that you become the visible symbol of defiance, the ghost that the Shogunate cannot catch, the hope that they cannot extinguish. Naruto looked at the map, then back at her. He saw the shrewd politician, the clan leader making a calculated risk. But he also saw the young woman with the weight of a nation on her shoulders, who spoke of the future with a desperate, yearning passion. She was trapped by her duty, just as the weaver had been trapped by the soldiers. Her cage was simply more ornate. I don't fight for commissions or politics. Naruto said finally. I fight for people. If your goal is to help them, then our paths align. He picked up the map. I'll accept your offer of sanctuary. For now. A wave of palpable relief washed over Ayaka, so profound that her perfect posture slackened for a brief second. A genuine, unpracticed smile touched her lips, transforming her face from a beautiful mask into something truly radiant. Thank you, she whispered, the two words carrying more weight than her entire, eloquent speech. The people of Inazuma thank you. She stood, bowed once more, and departed as gracefully as she had arrived, leaving Naruto alone in the clearing with a new destination and a new, powerful, and very complicated ally. He knew this alliance was a double-edged sword. He was now a player in a political game he barely understood, a pawn with the power of a king. He waited a full hour after Ayaka left before moving. The hidden observer was still there, their presence a faint itch at the edge of his senses. He decided it was time to meet his shadow. He rose and began to walk, not towards the city, but deeper into the woods, towards the imposing mountain that loomed over the forest, crowned by a grand, ancient shrine. If he was being watched, he would lead his tale to a place where secrets were currency and observation was a two-way street. The path to the grand Narukami shrine was long and winding, a seemingly endless staircase of worn stone that climbed the sacred mountain. The air grew thinner, cleaner, and was saturated with an energy that was different from the forest below. This was a place of immense power, old and vast and distinctly feminine. The trees here were ancient sakura, their gnarled branches heavy with blossoms that never seemed to fall. The sound of rustling prayer slips, tied to the branches by hopeful visitors, was a constant, papery whisper. At the summit stood the shrine itself. It was a breathtaking structure of deep crimson lacquer and gleaming gold trim, its intricate sloping roofs reaching for the sky. A colossal, sacred sakura tree, its trunk impossibly thick and its branches spreading like a canopy over the entire shrine complex, stood at its heart. The air hummed with a latent power that made the hair on Naruto's arms stand on end. He walked into the main courtyard, the gravel crunching under his feet. Shrine maidens in air distinctive red and white robes moved about their duties, their expressions serene and detached. None of them paid him any mind, as if a strangely dressed foreigner appearing at their sacred site was a common occurrence. My, to what do we owe the honor? The voice came from behind him, startlingly close. It was melodious and feminine, but laced with a teasing, foxy amusement. Naruto turned. The hidden observer was gone, and in their place stood a woman who seemed to be the living embodiment of the shrine's mischievous, ancient spirit. She was tall and slender, with long, flowing pink hair that faded to white at the tips, framing a heart-shaped face with intelligent, violet eyes that sparkled with mirth. Two large, pink fox ears, adorned with intricate golden earrings, twitched atop her head. She wore the elegant, elaborate robes of a guji, a head priestess, and carried a golden gohei, a ritual wand, which she tapped lightly against her palm. She was beautiful, but it was a dangerous, predatory beauty, like that of a fox who had just cornered a particularly interesting rabbit. "You're the one who's been following me," Naruto stated, his tone flat. The woman's smile widened, revealing a hint of sharp canines. "Following is such a crude term. I was merely observing." A new star appearing in Inazuma's stagnant sky is a rather noteworthy astronomical event, wouldn't you say? It would be negligent of me not to chart its course. She took a slow, deliberate circle around him, her eyes cataloging every detail. "The reports did not do you justice. Kuju Sera is many things: disciplined, honorable, tragically dull, but she is not weak. And you left her standing in a puddle. Then, not an hour ago, you had a lovely little chat with the Shirasagi Himegimi herself. You've done some very powerful friends and enemies in a very short amount of time. I am Yae Miko, the Guji of this shrine, and I am terribly curious." "Curious about what?" Naruto asked, his guard up. This man's playful demeanor was a carefully constructed facade, her mind as sharp and dangerous as shattered glass. "About this," she said, and tapped him lightly on the chest with her gohei. A spark of purple electro-energy, far more potent and refined than Sera's, discharged into him. It wasn't an attack, but a probe, a diagnostic spell. Instantly, the seimei inside him flared to life, not in anger, but in a powerful, defensive rejection of the foreign energy. A pulse of golden light radiated from his chest, effortlessly neutralizing Miko's spell and forcing her to take a half-step back, her eyes widening in genuine surprise. "Oh," she breathed, her playful facade cracking to reveal a sliver of raw astonishment. "Fascinating. It's not an elemental energy at all, is it? It's something else entirely. Something fundamental. Life itself, perhaps. No wonder A's puppet couldn't snuff you out. You were the antithesis of her eternity." The name, A, caught Naruto's attention. It was spoken with a familiarity, a hint of exasperation and deep-seated affection that betrayed a long and complicated history. "You seem to know a lot about me," Naruto said. "It's my turn. Why were you watching me?" "Because." Yae Miko's expression turned serious, the playful fox replaced by a cunning god-servant. "My dearest friend, the woman you know as the Raiden Shogun, has locked herself away in a prison of her own making. She pursues a flawed ideal to protect herself from the pain of loss, and in doing so, she is slowly letting her nation, and herself, wither and die. For 500 years, I have tried to reach her, to no avail. And then you arrive, a being of pure, chaotic, indomitable life. You are not a blade, as dear Ayaka might think. You are a typhoon, come to shatter the mirror calm sea of A's solitude. And I want to see the storm." Her motives were clear. She wanted to use him, a living weapon to break through her friend's self-imposed prison. She wasn't hiding it, She was laying her cards on the table, confident in her ability to control the game. "I'm not a weapon for you to aim," Naruto said coolly. "Oh, I wouldn't dream of aiming you," Miko chuckled, her playful demeanor returning. "That would spoil the fun. I merely wish to give you a nudge in the right direction and provide you with information. But first, a small test. To see if you are truly as remarkable as you seem." She led him to a small, secluded part of the shrine, where a stone lantern stood. The lantern was old and covered in talismans, but it radiated a palpable aura of malice and corruption. A dark, purple mist clung to it, and the air around it was cold and dead. This lantern was once a sacred artifact, but it was corrupted by a powerful kitsune spirit who went mad with grief, Miko explained, her tone light, as if discussing the weather. "It absorbs the life from its surroundings. My own power can suppress it, but not cleanse it. The curse is too deeply rooted. Show me, O descender of life. Purify it." It was a test, but also a genuine problem she couldn't solve. Naruto stepped forward, studying the artifact. He could feel the twisted, negative energy coiling within it, a vortex of pain and despair. He could also feel the faint, struggling spark of the lantern's original, sacred nature buried deep beneath the corruption. He didn't try to flood it with power. That would be like trying to put out a fire with oil. Instead, he placed his hand on the cold stone and closed his eyes. He sent a single, infinitesimally small seed of Seime into the lantern. He didn't command it to fight. He commanded it to grow. The seed, nurtured by his will, found the faint, struggling spark of the lantern's original essence and merged with it. Then, slowly, from the inside out, it began to expand. It was not a violent purification. It was a gentle, inexorable reclamation. The dark, malicious energy wasn't being destroyed. It was being composted, broken down, its negative aspects neutralized and turned into fuel for the growing light. The dark purple mist thinned, then vanished. The cold aura of malice was replaced by a gentle, soothing warmth. The stone of the lantern, once a dull, corrupted gray, began to glow from within with a soft, white light. The talismans clinging to it crumbled to dust, their purpose fulfilled. The curse was not just suppressed, it was gone. Healed. Naruto pulled his hand back. The lantern now radiated a feeling of profound peace. Miko was silent for a long time. Her violet eyes were fixed on the restored artifact, her playful smile completely gone, replaced by an expression of utter, unadulterated awe. She had expected a display of power, a brute force cleansing. She had not expected a miracle of such finesse, such profound understanding of the nature of life and corruption. Finally, she looked at him, and her gaze held a new, deeper level of respect. The curiosity was still there, but it was now alloyed with something more. Admiration. "Well now," she said, her voice a soft purr. "That changes things. It seems I have gravely underestimated you." She glided closer, her violet eyes locking with his. "Kamisato Ayaka may offer you sanctuary, a roof over your head. I offer you knowledge, the truth of this nation, the truth of its God, the secrets you will need to survive the path you are on. All I ask in return is that you continue to be interesting." She held out her hand. Not for a handshake, but palm up, an invitation. "Do we have an accord, Naruto Uzumaki?" She knew his full name. Of course she did. He looked at her hand, then into her sharp, intelligent eyes. Ayaka offered him a cause. Miko offered him a key. He was a stranger in a land determined to kill him, led by a god he was ideologically opposed to. He would need both. He didn't take her hand. Instead, he gave her a small, confident smirk, the first genuine one he'd shown since arriving in this world. "Only if you can keep up." Miko's laughter echoed through the ancient shrine, a sound like 1,000 tiny bells, full of delight and dangerous promise. The heron and the fox had both made their move. The golden ghost of Inazuma now had allies in the highest echelons of power. Each with their own designs on him, each drawn to the storm of life he brought to their shores. The game had truly begun. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Shadow of the Shumatsuban. In the silent, unseen depths of Inazuma, where loyalty was a weapon and information the deadliest of poisons, she was known only by her codename, Kagero, the Heat Haze. A flicker at the edge of sight, a distortion in the air, there and then gone. In reality, Her name was Hotaru. It was a name she hadn't heard spoken aloud in over a decade, a relic of a life before the Shumatsuban had found her, an orphan of a minor clan disgraced in a forgotten skirmish. They had given her a purpose, a creed, and a new identity forged in shadow and silence. She was a tool, honed to perfection. Her emotions were liabilities to be suppressed. Her body a vessel for the will of the state, her life forfeit to the preservation of eternity. Her new assignment was designated Threat Level S, a classification reserved for entities capable of destabilizing the nation itself. The target: a foreign anomaly, gender male, approximate age early 20s, with blonde hair and unusual facial markings. Goes by the name Naruto Uzumaki, but has been popularly dubbed the Golden Ghost. The dossier was a contradictory mess of official reports and wild rumors. The Kanju Commission file from Rito painted him as a cunning and efficient martial artist who had humiliated their officers non-lethally. The Tenryo Commission report from Inazuma City, personally signed by General Kujusera, described him as a dangerous dissident wielding an unknown, non-vision-based elemental power of an explosive and restorative nature, capable of standing against a high-ranking general. The Yashura Commission had remained suspiciously silent. The common folk whispered of a golden spirit who had healed a woman hollowed by the Vision Hunt decree and made flowers bloom from cobblestones. Hotaru's orders, delivered by her handler via a coded drop in a hollowed-out book, were simple and absolute. Observe. Document. Do not engage. The target's alliance with the Yashura Commission was suspected, and his subsequent visit to the Grand D. Narukami Shrine confirmed a dangerous convergence of interests. Her mission was to be his shadow, to learn the true nature of his power, his motivations, his weaknesses. She was to become the truth behind the rumors. She found him with ease. The sanctuary provided by Kamisato Ayaka was a small, unassuming residence in a quiet, respectable neighborhood on the city's outskirts, a place so mundane it was the perfect hiding spot. For 3 days, Hotaru observed from the rooftop of a nearby textile workshop, a perch that gave her a clear view of the house's courtyard and windows. She catalogued his routine. He rose with the sun. He spent hours in the small garden, not training in any martial sense, but in a state of quiet meditation that seemed to make the plants lean towards him, their colors growing more vibrant by the day. He ate the simple meals left for him by a silent Yashura Commission attendant. He read scrolls from the small library within the house. He was quiet, contained, and seemingly content. It was the profile of a patient man waiting for his moment, a predator conserving its energy. It fit the dossier. On the 4th day, he broke routine. Under the cover of dusk, he left the safe house, not in a furtive, stealthy manner, but with the casual stride of a man heading to a local tavern. He wore simple, borrowed Inazuman robes, a dark indigo yukata that made his foreign features stand out less. But a cheap straw hat did little to conceal the defiant shock of his blonde hair. Hotaru, cloaked in her own form of illusion, a jutsu of light and shadow that rendered her all but invisible to the mundane eye, fell in behind him, a ghost trailing a ghost. He did not head towards the grand, lantern-lit avenues of the main city. He turned into the labyrinthine network of unpaved alleys and narrow, winding streets that constituted the city's underbelly, the places the official maps ignored. This was where the city's true pulse could be felt, in the smell of charcoal fires, cheap sake, and poverty. Hotaru moved across the rooftops, her soft-soled tabi making no sound on the weathered tiles. Her senses were a razor's edge, cataloging every detail. The clatter of a mahjong game behind a screen. The cry of a hungry infant, the weary sigh of a man returning from the docks. The target's destination was a hovel in the poorest part of the slums, a lean-to shack made of driftwood and scavenged planks. Home to a family whose father had been taken by the Tenryo Commission a month prior for owning a vision he couldn't properly wield. The family was now destitute, their UNGEST child burning with a fever that the local herbalist, himself too poor to afford proper supplies, could not break. Hotaru watched from a shadowed eave, her mind clinical and detached, as the target knelt by the sick child's mat. He spoke to the weeping mother in a low, gentle voice. Hotaru couldn't hear the words, but she saw the mother's initial fear melt into a desperate, clinging hope. Then, she saw the light. It was exactly as the street-level rumors had described. A soft, warm, Golden luminescence bloomed from his hand as he placed it on the child's forehead. It was not the explosive flare of power from the Kuju-Sera report. It was gentle, nurturing, almost holy. Hotaru watched, her breath caught in her throat, as the child's fever flush receded. The labored, rattling breaths eased into a deep, peaceful sleep. The target stayed for a few moments more, speaking quietly with the mother, before pressing a small pouch into her hand. The money, Hotaru noted with a flicker of confusion. That the Yashura Commission had provided for his own expenses. He then departed as quietly as he had arrived. Log entry. Subject has demonstrated restorative abilities consistent with eyewitness accounts. Power can be modulated for a gentle, healing effect. Motive. Apparent altruism. This contradicts the profile of a political dissident seeking to destabilize the nation. Altruism is a vulnerability. Re-evaluating psychological profile. The next night, he visited a small, barren plot of land behind a tenement building. It was a communal garden, but the soil was thin and rocky, poisoned by runoff from a nearby smithy. Generations of residents had tried and failed to grow anything more than stunted, bitter vegetables. The target spent nearly an hour there, walking the plot, his hands trailing through the dirt. He didn't use the golden light. He simply walked. Yet, where he passed, Hotaru could almost feel a change in the earth, a deep, thrumming vitality returning to the dead soil. When he left, there was no visible difference, but the air above the plot smelled faintly of rich, wet loam. Log entry. Subject appears to possess a secondary, more subtle application of his primary ability. Seems capable of revitalizing non-sentient organic matter, including soil. Purpose. Unclear. This act provides no political or strategic advantage. It is inefficient. The pattern continued for a week. Each night, a new act of quiet rebellion through kindness. He didn't preach revolution. He didn't organize dissidents. He moved through the forgotten corners of the city like a mender of broken things. He found an old blacksmith whose hands had been gnarled by arthritis and eased the pain enough for the man to hold a hammer again. He found a stray dog with a broken leg and set the bone. The limb healing in moments under his golden touch. He reinforced the crumbling foundation of a charity house with what looked like roots he had coaxed from the earth, solidifying the structure without a single tool. Hotaru documented it all, her reports to her handler becoming increasingly difficult to write. The data did not align. The actions of the Golden Ghost were not those of a threat to be neutralized. They were the actions of a protector. Her training warred with the evidence of her own eyes. The Shumatsuban had taught her that power was a tool for control. It was used to intimidate, to enforce, to remove obstacles. Strength was a weapon. Yet this man, who possessed a power she was beginning to suspect was greater than any she had ever witnessed, wielded it to mend, to heal, to create. It was a profound and deeply unsettling paradox. He was using a god's power to perform a commoner's acts of kindness. Her internal conflict came to a head on the 8th night of her surveillance. She was perched atop the bell tower of a small, disused temple, a position that gave her a panoramic view of the lower city. The target was walking along the canal, his posture relaxed, when he suddenly stopped. He didn't look up. He didn't spin around. He simply tilted his head, as if listening to a sound only he could hear. "You're very good," his voice drifted up, calm and conversational. "I've known you were there since the forest. But your heart beats a little too fast when you're trying to be still. It gives you away." Hotaru froze. Every muscle in her body went rigid. Impossible. She was Kagero. She was a whisper. Her breathing was controlled, her heartbeat a steady, disciplined rhythm. No one had ever detected her. Not once. Panic, an emotion she hadn't felt since she was a child, flared in her chest. Her training took over instantly. Flee. Re-establish stealth. Observe from a new location. She dropped from the bell tower into the alley below, landing in a silent crouch. She melted into the shadows, her form blurring, and began a rapid, evasive maneuver through the backstreets. She was fast. She was silent. She was a shadow given form. But he was relentless. She didn't see him, but she could feel him. A sense of presence, of immense, calm vitality, always 2 steps behind her. She vaulted a wall, landing on a rooftop, and sprinted across the tiles. She could hear him now, not the sound of footsteps, but the faint whisper of displaced air, the rustle of his yukata as he matched her pace on the street below. He wasn't even trying to be stealthy. He was just following. She pushed harder, her movements becoming a dizzying display of elite ninjutsu. She leapt across a wide gap between buildings, twisting in midair to catch the lip of the opposite roof. She used a narrow bamboo scaffold as a ladder, scurrying up the side of a warehouse. She dropped a smoke pellet, a standard issue diversion, and used the thick, acrid cloud to change direction, diving through an open window into a darkened storeroom. She pressed herself into a corner, behind a stack of rice bales, and finally allowed her heartbeat to slow, her breathing to become a shallow, inaudible rhythm. The air in the storeroom was thick with the smell of dust and jute. Silence. Had she lost him? Had he given up the chase? A soft golden light began to seep through the cracks in the floorboards below her. It wasn't threatening. It was warm, inquisitive. Then his voice, now coming from directly outside the window she had just entered, spoke again, as calm as if he were commenting on the weather. "You can hide your presence, your sound, even your sight," he said. "But you can't hide your life force. To me, it shines brighter than any lantern. Are you going to stay in there all night?" Hotaru's blood ran cold. He hadn't been chasing her body. He had been tracking her very essence. All her training, all her skills in stealth and evasion, were utterly, fundamentally useless against him. He was a candle flame trying to hide from the sun. She remained perfectly still, her mind racing. This changed everything. Her mission was compromised. She was compromised. To be so completely outmaneuvered, so effortlessly tracked, it was a failure of a magnitude she had never experienced. The golden light faded. She heard the soft scuff of his sandals as he walked away. He hadn't pressed the advantage. He hadn't tried to capture or confront her. He had simply made his point, demonstrating his superiority in a way that was more unnerving than any threat. He had let her go. She stayed in that storeroom for a full hour. Her disciplined composure shattered, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and a strange, new, and terrifying emotion, respect. The next day, she needed to clear her head, to recalibrate. She donned a civilian disguise, a simple, gray kimono, her hair tied back with a plain wooden pin, and forced herself to walk through the crowded daytime markets. The noise, the smells, the press of the crowd, it was all meant to ground her, to remind her of the world she was sworn to protect through silent, unseen action. It was here that fate, or perhaps a being with a cruelly ironic sense of humor, intervened. She was pausing by a stall selling intricate hairpins and combs when someone jostled her from behind. She stumbled forward, bumping into the stall. A small, wooden box toppled from the counter. Hotaru, her reflexes instinctual, reached out to catch it, but her fingers merely brushed the lid. The box hit the ground, and a single, beautifully carved camellia hairpin skittered out. It was her own, one she had just been admiring. It had been her mother's. The only thing she had left of her old life, a treasure she kept hidden away, bringing it out only once a year to be cleaned. She had brought it to the market to find a special oil for the wood. Now, a tiny, almost invisible crack had appeared in one of the delicate petals. A wave of irrational, unshumatsuban-like despair washed over her. It was just a piece of wood. It was an attachment. Attachments were weaknesses, but it was her weakness. "Oh, I am so sorry. Are you all right?" Hotaru looked up from the broken pin and froze. It was him. The target. Naruto Uzumaki. He was standing right in front of her, his brow furrowed in genuine concern, a half-eaten dango skewer in one hand. He hadn't recognized her. To him, she was just another face in the crowd, a woman he had accidentally bumped into. "I'm fine," she managed, her voice a clipped, barely audible whisper. She knelt to retrieve the hairpin, her fingers trembling slightly. He knelt beside her. "Here, let me see. I'm pretty good at fixing things." Before she could protest, he gently took the hairpin from her grasp. He looked at the minuscule crack, his expression thoughtful. And then he did it. The same impossible thing she had witnessed a dozen times from the shadows. He held the pin in his palm, and for a fraction of a second, a mote of golden light, so small and quick that anyone else would have missed it, pulsed from his skin into the wood. He handed it back to her with a warm, easy smile. "There. Good as new." Hotaru took the pin, her fingers numb. She stared at it. The crack was gone. Not glued. Not filled. It had vanished, the grain of the wood flowing seamlessly where the fracture had been. It was an act of impossible restoration. A tiny miracle performed for a stranger in a crowded market over a trifle. It was the most profound demonstration of his power she had yet witnessed, precisely because it was so small, so unnecessary, so kind. She looked up at his face. He wasn't looking at the pin. He was looking at her, and his eyes held no suspicion, no guile. Only simple, human decency. His smile was open and genuine, a stark, brilliant sun in the gray, shadowy world she inhabited. "You should be more careful," he said, his smile turning into a gentle tease. "A beautiful pin like that deserves to be treasured." He then stood up, gave her a small nod, and continued on his way, disappearing into the throng, leaving her kneeling on the dusty ground, clutching a perfectly whole camellia hairpin. Hotaru remained there for a long time, oblivious to the river of humanity flowing around her. The foundation of her world, her training, her entire identity, had been shaken by his power. But it was this small, simple act of kindness, this casual display of a god's ability to fix a stranger's broken trinket, that shattered it completely. That night, she sat before a blank scroll, her ink brush poised. Her report was due. She was supposed to detail her compromised status, the target's detection of her, his inexplicable abilities. It was her duty. Her gaze fell upon the camellia hairpin resting beside the scroll, its wood warm and flawless. She dipped her brush in the ink. Log entry. Day 9. Subject continues to maintain a low profile within the Yashura Commission safe house. No unusual activity to report. Surveillance continues. It was the first lie she had ever put in an official report. It was an act of treason. An act of self-preservation. And, somewhere deep in the silent, frozen core of her being, a place she had thought long dead, she suspected it might also be an act of hope. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Unmoving God, the Unstoppable Life. For 2 weeks, the Golden Ghost was more myth than man. His interventions were precise, localized, and maddeningly unpredictable. He was a phantom who appeared in the city's shadowed corners, a whisper of hope that passed between the oppressed. Working in concert with the Yashura Commission's intelligence network, Naruto would receive word of a planned vision confiscation, a sweep by the Tenryou Commission, and he would simply appear. He never sought battle, but he never shied from it. His methods were always the same: overwhelming, non-lethal pacification. He turned swords into bouquets of iron-petaled roses, spears into weeping willows, and armor into prisons of fast-growing bamboo. He would free the captives, restore the stolen visions, and vanish before significant reinforcements could arrive, leaving behind baffled soldiers and a fresh crop of impossible rumors. His actions created a schism in the shogunate's authority. Public morale, once at rock bottom, began to stir with a dangerous new sentiment: defiance. Kuju Sera, burdened by her own growing doubts, found her forces constantly outmaneuvered, chasing a ghost who commanded the very essence of life. The Tenryou Commission became an object of public mockery. It's so. LDers more afraid of being turned into a garden than being struck down. The pressure mounted, a slow, inexorable build toward a breaking point. The breaking point arrived on a clear, unnervingly calm afternoon in the Hanamazaka district, the artisan quarter of Inazuma City. It was the largest coordinated raid yet, a desperate show of force by the Tenryou Commission to re-establish their authority. 100 soldiers, led by a high-ranking samurai commander, descended upon the district to round up a dozen known vision bearers, blacksmiths, weavers, painters, and swordsmen whose ambitions were now deemed a threat to eternity. This time, Naruto did not wait for them to strike. Tipped off by Ayaka's network, he was already there, standing in the center of the main square as the soldiers marched in, their armor glinting in the sun. The commander, a man named Aimochi with a face like a bulldog and a temper to match, bellowed at the sight of him. "There he is, the Golden Ghost. Seize him. Seize them all." Panic erupted. Citizens screamed and fled. The targeted vision bearers, who had been gathered by Naruto under the pretense of a meeting, drew their weapons, their faces pale with terror but resolute. They would not be taken like the Weaver woman. Naruto raised a hand, a calm gesture that seemed to halt the world. "Stay behind me," he said to the small group, his voice cutting through the rising chaos. As the first wave of 50 soldiers charged, a roaring tide of steel and purple cloth, Naruto took a deep breath and stomped his foot on the stone plaza. It was not a stomp of anger, but of command. He drove his will, his seimei, not into the soldiers, but into the earth beneath them. The result was biblical. The ancient stone flags of the plaza cracked and split. From the fissures erupted a literal forest. Trees, thick as pillars and gnarled with age, burst from the ground in an instant, their branches weaving together to form an impenetrable wall of living wood between the soldiers and the artisans. It was not a barricade, it was a fortress, born in a single, earth-shattering moment. The charging soldiers crashed into the wall of wood, their formations shattered, their momentum completely arrested. He summons forests, Aimochi roared, his face turning a shade of purple that clashed with his armor. Archers, fire over the top, burn it down. Dozens of flaming arrows arced through the sky. Before they could reach their apex, Naruto made a grasping motion with his hand. The trees, obeying his will, sprouted new, impossibly lush, and vibrant green leaves, each one slick with moisture. The leaves intercepted the arrows, extinguishing them with a collective hiss. The forest he had created was not just a wall, it was a living, responsive defense system. Enraged, Aimochi and the remaining soldiers drew their katanas and charged the wooden wall, hacking at the massive trunks. Their blades, sharp enough to slice through steel, merely bounced off the bark with dull thuds, leaving shallow, insignificant scratches that healed over in seconds, the wood knitting itself back together as they watched. Naruto stood within the relative peace of his wooden fortress, the vision bearers staring at him with expressions of pure, unadulterated awe. He had not thrown a single punch. He had not drawn a weapon. He had simply commanded the world to protect them, and it had obeyed. It was in this moment of impossible defiance, with 100 soldiers held at bay by a pop-up forest in the middle of the capital city, that the very atmosphere of Inazuma changed. The sky, a moment before a brilliant blue, began to darken. An unnatural twilight fell over the city, the sun obscured by clouds that had appeared from nowhere. The air grew heavy, thick with a pressure that made it hard to breathe. A low, pervasive hum filled the air, the sound of a billion cicadas going silent all at once. Every citizen, every soldier, every animal, fell quiet. The world held its breath. And then, the lightning fell. It was not a natural bolt. It was a pillar of pure, incandescent violet energy that struck the center of the square, just outside Naruto's forest wall. It did not flash and disappear, it lingered for a second. A solid column of divine judgment that vaporized the stone it touched, leaving a circle of glowing, molten glass. From the heart of that fading light, a figure emerged. It was a woman, her form radiating an aura of such cold, absolute authority that it dwarfed the sun. She wore an immaculate, ornate purple kimono, and her long, violet hair was tied in a perfect braid. Her face was a mask of serene, impassive beauty, her expression as still and unchanging as a statue's. In her hands, she did not hold a weapon. She was the weapon. This was not a human. This was a concept given form. This was the Raiden Shogun. Commander Aimochi and every soldier dropped to one knee, their heads bowed so low their helmets touched the ground. "Your Excellency," they chorused, their voices trembling with a mixture of terror and fanatic devotion. The Shogun did not acknowledge them. Her gaze, glowing with a soft, purple light, was fixed on the wall of trees. She raised a hand, her movements economical and devoid of any wasted motion. "Obstruction," she said, her voice a monotone, yet it echoed through the square as if spoken by a chorus of 1,000 judges. "In the pursuit of eternity, all obstacles must be erased." She made a slow, cutting motion with her hand. The air itself seemed to part before her. A blade of pure, invisible force shot forward. It did not burn or explode. It simply unmade. The colossal trees in its path did not splinter or fall. They dissolved into dust and memory, leaving a perfectly straight, 10-meter-wide path carved through the forest wall. Naruto felt the life force of his creations being extinguished, a sudden, violent void in the network of seimei he was commanding. He pushed the terrified artisans further back and stepped forward, placing himself in the gap. Facing the divine puppet, "Your fight is with me," Naruto called out, his voice steady despite the immense pressure radiating from the being before him. "Let them go." The shogun's head tilted a fraction of an inch, the first sign of anything resembling a reaction. The will of the individual is transient. The will of eternity is absolute. Both you and they are transient. Therefore, you are irrelevant. She vanished. One moment she was 50 meters away, the next she was directly in front of him, her hand outstretched, palm open, aimed at his chest. There was no sound, no displacement of air. Just a pure, conceptual shift in location. Naruto's instincts, honed by a war against gods, screamed. He threw himself backwards, a golden shield of Seimei flaring to life before him. The shogun's palm strike connected with the shield. There was no thunderous impact. There was only a deep, resonant thrum, like a temple bell struck with a sledgehammer. The golden shield, which had effortlessly blocked Kuju-Sera's lightning, cracked like glass. Fissures of violet energy spread across its surface, and it shattered into a million motes of golden light. The force of the blow threw Naruto backwards. Tumbling through the air, he twisted, landing on his feet at the far side of the square, a line of blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. His entire body screamed in protest. It wasn't just physical force. Her attack had been laced with an energy that sought to unravel his very being, to impose stasis on the life force that defined him. The shogun stood impassively, her hand still outstretched. Your resistance is illogical. The process of erosion is inevitable. I am merely accelerating it. She took a step, and the world around Naruto distorted. From the molten glass ring where she had first appeared, a blade materialized in her hand. It was a katana, but it seemed to pull the light from the air, its length a sliver of captive night sky, its edge humming with a terrifying purple energy. She held it aloft, and the dark clouds above began to swirl, a vortex of violet and black centering directly above her. This was it, the ultimate judgment, the Musou no Hitodachi. Naruto knew, with an absolute certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he could not block this. He could not dodge it. It was an attack that did not travel through space, but redefined it. An attack that cut not the body, but the very concept of existence. He poured every ounce of Seimei he possessed into his body, his form exploding in a column of golden light. He wouldn't survive, but he could try to shield the innocent people behind him from the fallout. The shogun's eyes glowed with divine fire. A single tear, glowing with purple light, traced a path down her cheek as she brought the blade down. Vanish. The world dissolved into a silent, searing plain of violet. And then, nothing. The pain he expected did not come. The oblivion he had braced for did not take him. The roar of destruction was absent. He opened his eyes. He was no longer in the Hanamazaka square. He was nowhere. He stood on an invisible floor in an infinite void. The sky above was a placid, starless expanse of deep indigo. Inverted, as if he were looking at a reflection of the night in a perfectly still lake. Floating in the vast, silent space around him were countless torii gates, arranged in no discernible pattern. Their crimson lacquer a stark contrast to the endless violet. The air was perfectly still, perfectly silent, and carried a profound, soul-crushing weight of loneliness. It was a realm of absolute order, absolute stillness. A perfect, beautiful, terrible prison. So, a new voice echoed, this one holding a trace of genuine curiosity beneath its cold, metallic monotone. You are the anomaly. Naruto turned. Seated on a raised dais of dark, polished stone was another woman. She looked identical to the shogun he had just faced. The same face, the same hair, the same regal bearing. But her attire was simpler, and her eyes, while still a piercing violet, held an intelligence and a depth that the impassive puppet had lacked. The puppet had been a storm. This was the eye of the storm. This was the source. The plane of Eutimia, she stated, her gaze analytical. My sanctuary. My soul. You were the first being to be brought here in 500 years. Your life force, it resisted erasure. An interesting, if futile, defiance. I am the one you would call the Raiden Shogun. Naruto took in his surroundings, his mind racing to process the impossible situation. He was inside her mind, her soul. You pulled me in here. Why? To understand, replied, her expression unchanging. My puppet is an instrument of my will, designed to execute the parameters of eternity. But it is not equipped for analysis of phenomena that fall outside those parameters. You are one such phenomenon. Your energy signature is not of this world. It is not of the 7 elements. It is an unruly, chaotic wellspring of becoming. It is the antithesis of all that I have built. She rose from her seat, gliding towards him. With every step she took, the oppressive weight of the realm seemed to increase, a psychological pressure that sought to crush his will, to make him kneel. This realm is a reflection of the ultimate truth. Eternity. A perfect, unchanging state. Free from the threat of ambition, the agony of loss, the erosion of time. All things tend towards stillness. It is the final, perfect form. Her words were not just sounds, they were manifestations. As she spoke of stillness, the air grew thick as stone, rooting Naruto to the spot. As she spoke of loss, phantom aches of his own past, of Jiraiya, of his parents, echoed in his heart, amplified by the realm's melancholic energy. You're wrong, Naruto grunted, fighting the immense pressure. Stillness isn't perfection, it's death. Life is messy. It's about moving forward, even with loss. It's about change. A stopped before him, her face inches from his. An assertion born of ignorance. You have seen loss, I can feel it in you. A deep, scarring history of it. Yet you cling to the very process that creates it. Why? Why champion the flame when you know it will inevitably be extinguished? Naruto looked into her eyes, and for the first time, he saw past the cold god queen. He saw a profound, ancient sadness. A fear so deep it had calcified into an unshakable philosophy. She wasn't a tyrant for the sake of power. She was a warden, guarding herself against a pain she could not bear to feel again. He couldn't defeat her with power. Here, in her own soul, she was omnipotent. He couldn't win an argument against a belief she had used to define her entire existence for half a millennium. So, he wouldn't argue. He would show her. He closed his eyes, ignoring the crushing pressure of her euthymia, and reached deep within himself. He found the small, warm ember of Seimei that remained after his clash with the puppet. It was tired, battered, and insignificant in this vast, divine realm. But it was alive. He didn't try to make it explode. He didn't try to form a shield. He focused all of his will, all of his belief in the simple, beautiful truth of transient life, into a single, creative act. He took a memory, the image of a sakura blossom he had seen at the Grand Narukami Shrine, and he willed it into existence. A single point of golden light appeared in the oppressive gloom between them. It pulsed, then unfolded, petal by delicate petal. It was a perfect sakura blossom, glowing with a soft, internal light. It wasn't defiant or aggressive. It simply was. It hung in the air, a tiny, vibrant island of warmth and color in A's infinite, sterile sea of purple. It reprised everything her world was not. Transient, fragile, beautiful, and alive. A stared at the blossom, her eternally placid expression finally, irrevocably breaking. Her eyes widened, her lips parting in a silent gasp. She reached out a hand, her fingers trembling slightly, as if to touch it. The flower was an impossible paradox, a statement of life blooming in the very heart of engineered death. It didn't fight her eternity. It simply existed alongside it, proving it was not absolute. The blossom held its form for a few, perfect seconds. It pulsed with a gentle, golden light, casting a warm glow on A's stunned face. Then, as all life must, it began to fade. The petals grew translucent, turned to shimmering dust, and vanished, leaving no trace. It had lived, and it had died. And the silence it left behind was more profound, more damning to her philosophy, than any shout could ever be. A's composure shattered. A storm of pure, uncontrolled emotion erupted from her. The placid purple sky of her soul boiled with rage, confusion, and a fear she had not felt in centuries. The realm itself began to destabilize, the torii gates flickering, the ground shaking. Get out, she shrieked, voice of the god giving way to the raw cry of a wounded woman. The world dissolved. Naruto felt a sensation like being turned inside out and flung across an infinite distance. He crashed back into his own body with a gut-wrenching lurch. Pain. Blinding. Absolute pain. He was lying in the crater of scorched glass in Hanamazaka Square, his body a mangled ruin. His bones were fractured, his muscles torn. His skin covered in burns that sizzled with residual lightning. The puppet shogun stood over him, her blade raised to finish the job. Her face returned to its impassive mask, but her movements were now stiff, uncertain. Before she could strike, a flurry of gold-trimmed paper charms filled the air, intercepting her path. They erupted in a burst of pink, foxfire energy, forcing her back. Yae Miko appeared, standing between Naruto and the Shogun, her expression devoid of its usual mirth, replaced by a cold, dangerous fury. "That is enough, eh?" she said, her voice dangerously low. The Shogun puppet tilted her head, processing the new command, its internal logic clearly in conflict. It recognized Miko. It recognized the disruption. It looked down at Naruto's broken form, then back at its oldest friend. After a moment of tense silence, it lowered its sword, turned, and dissolved into a flicker of electro-energy, vanishing as suddenly as it had appeared. Naruto, his consciousness fading, managed to look up at Miko. He saw her lips move, but the sound was distant, fading. His last thought before darkness claimed him was not of his defeat, but of the look on A's face when she saw the flower. He hadn't won. He had lost, decisively. But in the heart of the unmoving god, he had planted a single, unstoppable seed of life. And now, it had begun to grow. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Aftershocks and Allegiances. Consciousness returned not as a crashing wave, but as a slow, creeping tide, pulling Naruto from a lightless ocean of oblivion. The first sensation was smell. A complex, layered aroma of dried herbs, old cedar wood. And the clean, crisp scent of ozone that clung to his own skin like a shroud. The second was the feeling of being swaddled in silk, his battered body resting on a futon of impossible softness. The third was the gentle, rhythmic hum of immense, ancient power that saturated the very air he was breathing. He opened his eyes. He was in a dimly lit, circular room. The walls lined with shelves holding not books, but scrolls, artifacts, and clay pots filled with desiccated flora. A single, ornate paper lantern hanging from the high, domed ceiling cast a warm, gentle light. The air was still and silent. This was not the main shrine. This was a place hidden away, a sanctuary of secrets. So, the little storm god awakens. Yae Miko's voice, stripped of its usual playful lilt and imbued with a dry, weary irony, came from a corner of the room. She was seated at a low table, meticulously grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle. She wasn't wearing her formal Guji robes, but a simpler, more practical kimono of deep violet. Her expression was tired, her usual mask of amusement set aside, revealing the strain of the previous day's events. Naruto tried to sit up, and a symphony of agony erupted from every cell in his body. A sharp, searing pain shot through his ribs, his back, his limbs. It wasn't the clean pain of a cut or a broken bone, it was a deeper, more fundamental ache. As if his very life force had been frayed and stretched to its breaking point. He collapsed back onto the futon with a sharp hiss of breath. "I would advise against moving, Aiko said without looking up from her work, the rhythmic grinding of the pestle the only sound in the room. "The puppet's strike was designed to extinguish your existence. The only reason you still have E1 is because your particular brand of life force is absurdly stubborn. The physical damage is the least of your concerns, your spirit is bruised." "Where are we?" Naruto rasped, his throat dry. "The heart of the Grand Narukami Shrine. A place not even the Tenryou Commission would dare to enter without invitation," she replied. She finished her grinding, scraped the resulting powder into a small bowl, and added a few drops of clear liquid from a vial. She glided over to him, her movements fluid and silent. "Drink this. It will not heal you. Only your own peculiar energy can do that, but it'll soothe the electro residue curdling in your system and help your spirit settle." She knelt and gently lifted his head, bringing the bowl to his lips. The concoction was bitter and earthy, but as it went down, he felt a cooling sensation spread through his chest, calming the frantic, sizzling energy left behind by the Shogun's attack. "Thank you," he said, his voice a little stronger. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw the deep exhaustion in her eyes. "You saved my life." Miko met his gaze, and a flicker of a more complex emotion, not amusement, not pity, but something akin to a shared vulnerability, passed through her expression. "Do not mistake my actions for pure altruism, Naruto Uzumaki. Your continued existence is strategically vital to my own plans. Your death would have been a great inconvenience." She set the bowl aside, but remained kneeling by his side. "However," she added, her voice softening almost imperceptibly, seeing A so lost in her pursuit of eternity. That she would strike down something so vibrant was more than I could stomach. I acted for Inazuma, I acted for her, and yes, I suppose I acted for you as well. Do try not to make a habit of it. I can only defy a god so many times before she stops listening to me entirely. The news of the battle in Hanamazaka spread through Inazuma like wildfire. But truth, in a nation built on control, is a malleable substance. The official decree from the Tenryou Commission was sterile and absolute. The dissident known as the Golden Ghost had been confronted by the Raiden Shogun herself and was annihilated by her divine judgment. The vision bearers he had incited were captured and processed. Order was restored. Eternity was unshaken. But the whispers in the street told a different story. Hundreds of people had witnessed the event. They had seen the man who commanded forests. They had felt the terrifying descent of their god. But they had also seen him survive the initial, impossible attack. They had seen the shogun's final, cataclysmic strike, but no body had been found. And most damningly of all, they had seen the Guji of the Grand Narukami Shrine, Yae Miko herself, appear and seemingly halt the proceedings. In the pristine, elegant halls of the Kamisato estate, Ayaka listened to the reports from her network of spies and informants. She stood before a large, open window overlooking a perfectly manicured garden, where a gentle rain was falling, each drop tracing a path down the pane of glass. Her expression was a mask of calm serenity, but her hands, hidden in the long sleeves of her kimono, were clenched into tight fists. So, the Tenryou Commission claims he was obliterated, she mused to Toma, her loyal attendant, who stood waiting patiently a few paces behind her. That is the official proclamation, my lady. Toma confirmed. It is being read in every major square. But the street-level chatter is far more chaotic. Some say he ascended into a golden light. Others say Lady Yae spirited him away. No one truly believes he is simply gone. Ayaka's lips curved into a faint, sharp smile. Perfect. A martyr is useful, but a martyr who might not be dead is a legend. A legend is a symbol of hope. And hope is the one thing the Shogun's eternity cannot tolerate. The Tenryou Commission's narrative is brittle. We must crack it. She turned from the window, her eyes alight with a shrewd political fire that belied her graceful appearance. Toma, I want you to activate our assets within the city's storytellers and tea houses. I want the tale of the Golden Ghost to be told, but with specific embellishments. Do not portray him as a rebel who fights the Shogun, but as a benevolent spirit, a force of nature that the Shogun's cold eternity cannot comprehend. Frame the encounter not as a defeat, but as a test. A test of our God's wisdom. Why did she hesitate? Why did Lady Yae intervene? Let these questions fester. We will use rumor to erode the people's faith in the Shogun's absolute judgment, replacing it with fascination for the anomaly she could not erase. An excellent strategy, my lady, Toma said, bowing. It turns their propaganda against them. Indeed, Ayaka said, her gaze returning to the rain-swept garden. Her thoughts drifted to the man himself. She had gambled on him, allied her clan's future with a force she barely understood. Hearing of his confrontation with the Shogun had filled her with a terrifying dread, a feeling that went beyond the potential loss of a strategic asset. It had been personal, and the news of his potential survival, however slim, had sparked a relief so profound it had startled her. She had a nation to save, a duty to uphold. But she found herself praying, not just for her cause, but for the safety of the strange, kind, and impossibly powerful man who had become its heart. That evening, under the guise of delivering a sacred offering to the shrine, she made her way up the mountain. She was granted a rare audience with Yae Miko, who led her not to the main hall, but to the hidden sanctuary. When she saw Naruto, lying pale and still on the futon, a sharp pang went through her chest. He looked so vulnerable, a stark contrast to the confident man she had met in Shinju Forest. He was awake, and his golden blue eyes met hers. She knelt, performing a perfect, formal bow. Uzumaki-san, it is a relief to see you are alive. Barely, Naruto replied, a wry, tired smile touching his lips. Your intel was good, a little too good. Walked right into the hornet's nest. It was a risk, Ayaka admitted, her voice soft. One that I am deeply sorry has cost you so dearly. It was a risk I chose to take, he corrected her gently. He saw the guilt in her eyes, the weight of command. "This isn't on you." Their strategic meeting was held in hushed tones, with Yae Miko listening silently from her corner. Ayaka detailed her plan to use the rumors to their advantage. Naruto, despite his condition, listened intently, his mind sharp. He offered suggestions, pointing out potential pitfalls, ways the Tenryou Commission might retaliate. He spoke with the quiet authority of a seasoned commander, his strategic insights impressing both women. He was a warrior not just of body, but of mind. As Ayaka prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Please, recover well. Inazuma still has need of you." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment longer than necessary, a silent conveyance of gratitude and concern, before she turned and departed into the night. Far away, in the main dojo of the Tenryou Commission headquarters, the sound of a bamboo shinai striking a practice dummy echoed with relentless, punishing force. Strike after strike, Kuju Sera hammered away at the dummy, her movements precise, powerful, and filled with a cold, desperate fury. Sweat beaded on her brow, her arms burning with exertion, but she didn't stop. She was trying to beat back the images that had seared themselves into her mind. The image of the Golden Ghost, standing against 100 of her best soldiers, protected by a forest of his own creation. The image of the Raiden Shogun, her god, her ideal, hesitating. And the most damning image of all, Yae Miko, the sly, infuriating fox, stepping in to protect the enemy of the state, and the shogun allowing it. Her world, once a simple, orderly place built on the bedrock of loyalty and divine authority, had been fractured. The official report she had been forced to co-sign was a lie. The dissident had not been annihilated. He had survived. He had faced the Musou no Hitodachi, a strict, said to be the embodiment of divine truth, and he still existed. It was a contradiction of an impossible magnitude. If the shogun's judgment was absolute, he should be gone. If he was not gone, then the judgment was not absolute. If the judgment was not absolute, then the eternity she had sworn her life to was flawed. With a final, guttural roar, she splintered the practice dummy, sending bamboo shards scattering across the polished wooden floor. She stood panting in the silence of the dojo, her chest heaving. The physical exertion did nothing to quiet the chaos in her soul. She was Kuju Sera, the devoted general, the loyal servant of the unmoving god. But for the first time in her life, she felt the terrifying, heretical whisper of doubt. And it had a name. Naruto Uzumaki. She respected his power. She had from their first clash. But watching him face the shogun, watching him push back against the ultimate authority with a will that matched its intensity, had planted something more than respect. It was a seed of unwilling admiration for the strength of his conviction, a strength that seemed to come from within himself, not from devotion to an external power. He was an anomaly not just in power, but in principle. And she, the guardian of the old order, found herself dangerously, terrifyingly fascinated by the man who threatened to burn it all down. And in the shadows, another watched and waited. From a hidden perch overlooking the shrine, Hotaru had witnessed Yae Miko's intervention. She had seen the Guji spirit Naruto's broken body away. Her mission was to observe the target. And the target was now inside the most secure, magically shielded location on Narukami Island. She could not follow. She sat composing her next report. This was the most critical intelligence yet. The target had not only survived a direct confrontation with the Raiden Shogun, but he was now under the direct protection of the Guji of the Grand Narukami Shrine, a clear indication of an Aliyah NCE that threatened the entire political structure of Inazuma. To report this truth was her absolute duty. But her fingers hesitated over the brush. She remembered the warmth of the camellia pin in her hand. She remembered the casual, unthinking kindness he had shown her, a stranger. She thought of the raw, divine power of the shogun, an absolute force meant to crush all threats to eternity. And she thought of the target, who had stood against that force to protect a dozen artisans he barely knew. Her training told her he was the threat, a foreign element causing instability. Her instincts, the ones she had suppressed for so long, whispered a different story. The true threat was an eternity that required the annihilation of someone so full of life. She made a choice. Her report was a masterpiece of half-truths. She detailed the shogun's intervention and the battle. But she framed Naruto's survival as a fluke, a result of the unstable terrain and the shogun's desire to avoid collateral damage. She omitted Yae Miko's involvement entirely. In her report, the Golden Ghost had simply vanished after the final strike, his status unknown, likely succumbing to his wounds in some unknown location. She was downgrading his importance, painting him as a spent force, buying him time. It was an act of high treason. It was illogical. It was a betrayal of everything she was. But as she sealed the scroll, she felt not guilt, but a flicker of something she had almost forgotten. A sense of purpose that was truly her own. She was no longer just observing the Golden Ghost. She was protecting him. Back in the sanctuary, Naruto slowly began to heal. Under Miko's watchful eye, he spent his days in quiet meditation, coaxing his frayed seimei back into a cohesive whole. It was during these long, quiet hours that Miko, perhaps seeing a captive and willing audience, began to speak. She told him of her twin sister, Makoto, the previous Electro Archon. Makoto had been the god of transience, the face of Inazuma, while had been her Kagemusha, her body double, the warrior in the shadows. Makoto was the one who had died in the cataclysm 500 years ago. Eternity is A's fortress, Miko explained, her voice soft with ancient sorrow. She believes it is the only way to protect Inazuma from the pain of loss, to prevent another tragedy like the one that took her sister. She has sacrificed her own heart for this ideal. The puppet she created is the perfect, unfeeling ruler, while she meditates in the plane of Eutimia, her consciousness the anchor that keeps the nation locked in time. She's trying to stop the world from turning, just to keep a memory safe, Naruto murmured, understanding dawning. It wasn't malice. It was grief, magnified to a divine scale. Precisely, Miko affirmed. And you, with your power that screams of change, growth, and moving on, are a personal insult to the memory of her greatest loss. The fact that you unsettled her, that you made her feel something for the first time in centuries, that is both a great danger and a great opportunity. He was healing. His body was mending, his power slowly returning. But as the aftershocks of his battle rippled through Inazuma, forging new alliances and shattering old faiths, Naruto knew the true fight was just beginning. He had survived the god. Now, he had to find a way to save the woman. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Serpent's Shadow. The Sun's Embrace. A month passed in the serene, hidden sanctuary of the Grand Narukami Shrine. For Naruto, it was a period of quiet, introspective healing. The wounds from his clash with the shogun were more than physical, they were spiritual, a dissonance carved into his soul by a power antithetical to his own. He spent his days in meditation, not just replenishing his seimei, but deepening his understanding of it. He learned to feel its ebb and flow not as a tool to be wielded, but as an extension of his own breath, his own heartbeat. The golden core within him, once a roaring bonfire, settled into the vast, calm, and immeasurable power of a star, quiescent but holding an infinite potential for light and warmth. His legend, meanwhile, cultivated by Ayaka's whispers and Miko's silence, grew to mythic proportions. He was the benevolent spirit who could not be erased, the question mark at the heart of the shogun's absolute authority. The Yashura Sea, Amishin's influence swelled as the people's faith in the Tenryou Commission wavered. The stage was being set for a larger political confrontation. It was Yae Miko who dictated the next move. Your recovery is complete, she announced one morning, appearing in the sanctuary with 2 travel-ready packs. And your period of quiet convalescence is over. It is time to introduce you to the other side of this conflict. The resistance, Naruto stated, having already pieced together her intentions from their many conversations. Precisely, Miko said, a sharp, foxy glint in her eyes. Ayaka may win the hearts and minds on Narukami, but hearts and minds cannot fight a war. The Sangonomiya resistance on Watatsumi Island has the soldiers, the will, and the military experience. They are, however, losing. They are outmanned, outsupplied, and their morale is being ground down by a war of attrition. They need more than just a symbol. They need a miracle. She unfurled a nautical chart on the low table. It depicted the scattered islands of the Inazuman archipelago. Her slender finger tapped on the westernmost island, a spiral-shaped landmass surrounded by vibrant coral reefs. Watatsumi Island. They worship a different god there, or rather, the memory of one. The great serpent Orobashi, who was slain by your new acquaintance, during the Archon War centuries ago. Their hatred for her is ancient and profound. They will never bow to the Raiden Shogun. Her finger then traced a path to the island that lay between Narukami and Watatsumi. It was a dark, fractured place on the map, wreathed in storm clouds. To get to them, you must pass Yashiori Island. This is where the serpent fell. Its skeletal remains litter the landscape, a monument to a god's death. But a god's death is not a clean thing. Its lingering resentment, its divine hatred, has soaked into the very soil, creating a curse the locals call Tadaragami. It is a plague of endless lightning and a sickness that drives men mad and drains their life away. It is this curse that truly saps the resistance's strength, making the island a near uninhabitable battleground. And you want me to do something about it, Naruto surmised. Miko's smile was predatory. I want you to do what you do best, little storm god. I want you to perform an act so undeniably divine that the children of the serpent will have no choice but to see you as a gift from the heavens. Secure their allegiance. Turn their desperate rebellion into a true army. I have arranged for a boat and a trustworthy captain. The rest, she finished, is up to you. The journey was a stark reminder that Inazuma was a land at war not only with itself, but with nature. Their vessel was a small, swift skirmish boat, captained by a grizzled, taciturn former sailor of the Watatsumi Navy named Kenji. He regarded Naruto with a deep, ingrained suspicion, his answers to any questions short and clipped. He was loyal to Miko for some past debt, but his loyalty did not extend to her strange, blonde-haired associate. As they left the relative safety of Narukami's waters, the sky grew dark. The sea, once a placid turquoise, turned a churning, angry gray. Ahead of them, a perpetual thunderstorm raged, a permanent feature of the sea surrounding the Isle of Seirai. Jagged bolts of violet lightning tore through the sky, striking the water with explosive force, creating whirlpools of superheated steam. This is the Seirai storm. Kenji yelled over the roar of the wind and thunder. No ship can pass through it. We must go around, add a day to the journey. Stay the course, Naruto replied calmly. Walking to the prow of the ship, he braced himself against the railing, the sea spray and electrified air whipping at his face. It's suicide, Kenji protested. Naruto closed his eyes, extending his senses. He could feel the chaotic, raw electro-energy of the storm. But beneath it, he could also feel the life of the sea, the schools of fish, the whales calling in the deep, the plankton blooming in the currents. He reached out with his seimei, not to fight the storm, but to speak to the sea. He sent a pulse of calming, vital energy into the water. The effect was subtle at first. The churning waves directly before the boat seemed to lose some of their ferocity. He pushed more energy out, creating a corridor of relative peace in the raging ocean. The water smoothed, the wind lessened. He wasn't stopping the storm. He was creating a moving bubble of calm within it, a path through the chaos. Lightning still flashed overhead, but it seemed to arc away from their vessel, repelled by the serene, life-filled energy that now enveloped it. Kenji stood at the helm, his knuckles white, his mouth agape as he steered his boat through a tranquil path in the heart of an impossible tempest. He stared at Naruto's back, at the man who stood calmly at the prow, seemingly taming the very ocean with his will. The sailor's suspicion was rapidly being replaced by a profound, trembling awe. They passed through the storm and arrived in the waters of Yashiori Island by dusk. And it was here that they encountered a new kind of hell. The sky was a sickly, bruised purple. A constant, miserable drizzle fell, and the air was thick with a palpable aura of despair that clung to the skin like a cold sweat. It smelled of decay, ozone, and ancient sorrow. On the island itself, the landscape was dominated by the colossal, bleached white skeleton of a serpent god. Its ribs, each one the size of a longhouse, clawed at the sky. Its massive skull, jaw agape in a silent scream, formed a cavernous landmark known as the Serpent's Head. This was the source of the Tatarigami. They did not land. They sailed south, toward the vibrant, glowing coral formations that marked the territory of Watatsumi Island. As they approached, the oppressive gloom of Yashiori faded, replaced by a soft, ethereal light emanating from the island itself. The architecture was unlike anything on Narukami. Buildings were carved from giant, pastel-colored conch shells, and bridges were woven from glowing coral. Waterfalls cascaded from floating islands held aloft by unknown means. It was beautiful, alien, and magical. Their welcome was not. As their boat entered the main harbor of Buro village, a dozen soldiers in unfamiliar armor, a blend of samurai plate and seashell motifs, surrounded the dock, their spears leveled. They were led by a young man with canine ears and a bushy tail, his expression fierce and his posture radiating the authority of a seasoned commander. This was Guro, general of the Watatsumi army. "State your business," Guro commanded, his voice a sharp bark. "This is a military zone. No unauthorized vessels from Narukami are permitted." Naruto disembarked, his hands held open in a gesture of peace. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I was sent by Yae Miko. I'm here to help." Guro's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Yae Miko, the Shogun's head priestess. We have no dealings with the Narukami shrine. Her games and schemes are not welcome here." His gaze swept over Naruto's foreign appearance. "We have heard whispers of a golden ghost. A powerful dissident. But whispers are not allies. The Shogunate has tried to plant spies among us before. We need proof of your intentions." "Fair enough," Naruto said. He turned and pointed back across the water, towards the grim, skeletal silhouette of Yashiori Island. "Your greatest enemy isn't the Shogun's army. It's that curse. The Tatarigami. It poisons your soldiers, makes your ancestral land uninhabitable, and drains your resources. I will lift it." A wave of murmurs went through the assembled soldiers. A few laughed openly. Guro scoffed. "Lift the Tatarigami. Many have tried. Priests, exorcists, even the Shogun's own Onmyoji in decades past. The curse is the lingering will of a dead god. It cannot be lifted. It can only be endured." "Gods are not so different from people," Naruto replied, his voice quiet but firm. "Their wounds can be healed. Their anger can be soothed. Take me to the source. To the serpent's head. I will show you." There was a long, tense silence. Guro studied Naruto's face, searching for any sign of deception. He saw none. Only a calm, unwavering confidence that was either the mark of a madman or something else entirely. He looked at Kenji, his own countryman, who simply gave a slow, reverent nod. "That was enough." "Very well," Guro said finally, lowering his spear. "I will take you. But if this is a trick, you will not leave this island alive." The journey to the Serpent's Head was a grim affair. They traveled on a small fleet of resistance boats, the Watatsumi soldiers tense and somber as they approached the blighted shore. The moment they set foot on Yashiori Island, the oppressive weight of the curse settled on them. It was a physical thing, a pressure on the chest, a constant feeling of being watched by something ancient and full of hate. The soldiers, even Guro, looked paler. Their movements more sluggish. They trekked through a landscape of dead trees and purple-tinged grass. A constant, low groan seemed to emanate from the giant skeleton that dominated the skyline. The sound of a god's eternal agony. They finally arrived at the skull, a massive cavern filled with a roiling, concentrated haze of violet energy. This was the heart of the Tatarigami. Air was so thick with malice it was hard to draw a full breath. Several of the younger soldiers were already showing signs of sickness, a telltale purple rash appearing on their skin. "This is it," Guro said, his hand resting on his sword. "The core. No one can stay here for more than a few minutes without being permanently afflicted." Naruto walked forward alone, stopping at the edge of the concentrated haze. He closed his eyes and reached out with his senses. He felt it, a consciousness. It wasn't intelligent, not anymore. It was a raw, primal scream of betrayal, pain, and hatred, endless. Sly echoing from the moment of Orobashi's death. It was a divine wound left to fester for centuries. He wouldn't be able to simply flood it with seimei. That would be like trying to heal a wound by cauterizing it with a star. The conflicting energies would tear the island apart. He had to do what he had done with the corrupted lantern, but on a scale a million times larger. He had to find the spark of the original god, the noble spirit of Orobashi that his followers revered, and heal it from the inside out. He sat down, crossing his legs in a meditative posture, much to the confusion of the watching soldiers. "This might take a while," he said calmly. "Just stand back." Then, he began. He didn't explode with light. Instead, a gentle, steady, golden aura began to emanate from his body, pushing back against the oppressive purple gloom. He sent a thin, delicate tendril of pure seimei into the heart of the storm, not as an attack, but as an offering. It was a whisper of peace in an eternity of rage. The curse reacted violently. The violet haze roiled and lashed out, a bolt of dark lightning striking the ground near Naruto, but he didn't flinch. His golden aura absorbed the blow. He sent another tendril, and another. He was tirelessly extending a hand to a raging, wounded beast. For the rest of the day, he sat there, a solitary golden beacon in a sea of violet despair. The Watatsumi soldiers watched, their skepticism slowly turning to disbelief. The sickly pressure of the curse was lessening, pushed back by the expanding bubble of serene, warm energy emanating from the strange man. The first day turned into the first night. Naruto did not move, did not eat, did not drink. He was locked in a silent, titanic struggle of wills. Goro ordered his men to set up a perimeter, to watch over the man who was attempting the impossible. By the second day, a visible change began to occur. The constant, groaning sound from the skeleton lessened in volume. The angry purple of the haze began to soften, its edges tinged with gold. Small, vibrant green shoots of grass began to sprout in the ground around Naruto, a circle of life expanding outwards. By the third day, the TRANS formation was undeniable and spectacular. The violet haze was gone, replaced by a soft, shimmering golden mist. The oppressive atmosphere of hatred had vanished, replaced by a feeling of profound, tranquil peace. The dead trees on the hillsides began to sprout new, green leaves. The purple-stained soil faded to a rich, healthy brown. Clean, clear water began to trickle from the rocks, forming a stream that flowed out of the serpent's skull, washing away the last of the blight. Naruto, at the center of it all, slowly opened his eyes. He was pale and visibly exhausted, but his golden aura, now encompassing the entire valley, was as bright and steady as the morning sun. He had done it. He hadn't just suppressed the curse. He had cleansed it. He had taken centuries of divine hatred and soothed it into a peaceful memory. He had healed the wound of a dead god. He got to his feet, swaying slightly from the exertion. He looked at the reborn valley, at the colossal skeleton that no longer meant to scream in agony but rested in silent, majestic peace. He had felt the last moments of Orobashi's consciousness fade, not into nothingness, but into a gentle acceptance. He turned to face the Watatsumi soldiers. Every single one of them, from the youngest recruit to General Goro himself, was on one knee. Their heads were bowed, their expressions a mixture of tearful gratitude and religious awe. They were not kneeling to a powerful ally. They were kneeling before a being they perceived as divine, a kami who had come and healed their sacred land and laid their tormented god to rest. Goro looked up, his fierce general's eyes filled with an unwavering, absolute loyalty. "Your name will be honored on Watatsumi Island for 10,000 years, Lord Naruto," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Our lives, our swords, our home, they are yours to command." The alliance was forged, not in a contract or a council, but in the heart of a healed valley, under the peaceful gaze of a serpent's shadow. Bathed in the warmth of a golden sun's embrace. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. A Blade's Reflection. Discipline was the bedrock of Kuju Sera's existence. It was in the precise, economical fold of her uniform, the disciplined knot of her hair, the rigid control she maintained over her posture, her voice, her very thoughts. Discipline was the wall she had built around herself, stone by stone, to contain a world of chaos. And now, that wall was beginning to crumble. It began with the official report of the Hanamazaka incident. It was a masterpiece of political fiction, proclaiming the utter annihilation of the Golden Ghost. A clean, decisive victory for the Shogun, a reaffirmation of eternity. Sera had signed it, her hand steady, while the memory of Yae Miko's intervention and the anomaly's impossible survival screamed in her mind. The lie felt like acid in her throat. Then came the whispers from the west. At first, they were dismissed as battlefield delusions, the ravings of exhausted Watatsumi soldiers. The Tatarigami, the eternal curse of Yashiori Island, was gone. Not suppressed, not dormant. Gone. The land was healing. The sky was clearing. The plague of divine hatred that tormented the island for centuries had vanished overnight. When the formal intelligence report arrived from her own Tenryo Commission scouts, it was delivered in a sealed, high-priority dispatch. She read it alone in her office, the paper trembling almost imperceptibly in her hand. The report was clinical, filled with atmospheric readings and geological data, but the conclusion was inescapable. The phenomenon was real. The cause, it stated, was an unidentified energetic pacification event, seemingly originating from a single, foreign entity aligned with the Sangonomiya resistance. The report did not name him. But it didn't have to. Sarah closed her eyes, the paper crinkling in her tightening fist. First, he had created life from nothing in the city square. Now, he had healed the wound of a dead god. These were not the actions of a mere dissident. They were the actions of a being who operated on a scale she could not comprehend. Her god, A, had slain Orobashi, and the scar of that act had festered for 500 years. This man, this Naruto Uzumaki, had come and cleansed that scar in 3 days. The cognitive dissonance was a physical weight, pressing down on her, making it hard to breathe. Her entire worldview rested on a single, immutable axiom: the Raiden Shogun was absolute. Her power, her wisdom, her judgment, they were the definition of truth. But the evidence of her own senses, the verifiable reports from the field, they all pointed to a different truth. A truth where the Shogun's eternity was flawed, her judgment was not final, and her greatest enemy was not a monster, but a miracle worker. Discipline demanded she ignore these contradictions. Duty demanded she focus on her task, crushing the Watatsumi resistance. But a different, more fundamental part of the part that valued honor not as blind obedience, but as an unflinching devotion to what is right, demanded answers. Her investigation began not with accusations, but with numbers. She was a general. She understood logistics. War was a beast that fed on supplies, mora, and men. With the authority granted to her as head of the Tenryo Commission's armed forces, she initiated a full strategic audit. Under the guise of optimizing resource allocation for the final push against the resistance. It was a perfect cover, one that her adoptive father and the head of the Kuju clan, Kuju Takayuki, praised for its fiscal prudence. She locked herself in the archives, a cold, sterile vault filled with endless scrolls and ledgers. For days, she traced the flow of resources, her sharp eyes scanning manifests, deployment rosters, and procurement requests. At first, everything seemed in order. But Sarah's mind was as sharp as her arrows. She began to notice subtle patterns, tiny discrepancies that a less meticulous eye would have missed. A shipment of grain destined for the front lines on Yashiori Island that had been recorded as lost in a storm, yet there were no storms on record for that date. A significant payment from the Kanju Commission to a trading company that didn't seem to exist, for consultation services. A request for rare and restricted alchemical reagents from the Yashura Co.'s mission, signed with what she now recognized as a clumsy forgery of a Yashura seal, that had been approved and fulfilled by her own clan's quartermasters. She cross-referenced the dates. Each discrepant coincided with a major setback for the Watatsumi forces that could not be explained by direct military action. A sudden outbreak of food poisoning. A strange sickness that weakened their frontline troops. A batch of faulty arrowheads that shattered on impact. It was sabotage. A campaign of clandestine warfare being waged not just against the resistance, but in a way that seemed designed to prolong the conflict, not end it. The trail of whispers and numbers led her, inevitably, to a single, chilling nexus point: her own clan, and by extension, her own father. The Kuju clan, in conjunction with elements of the Kanju Commission, was playing a double game. But why? To what end? The only logical answer was that they were acting on behalf of an outside influence. An influence with deep pockets and a vested interest in a weak, destabilized Inazuma. The Fatui. The thought was treasonous. To suspect her own father, the man who had adopted her, who had raised her to be the shogun's most loyal servant. Of betraying the nation, it was a weight far heavier than any battlefield command. Her discipline, her lifetime of training, demanded she present her findings to him, to her god. But her newfound doubt, that insidious whisper that now had a voice like the golden ghost, urged caution. If the corruption went as high as she suspected, she could not afford to show her hand. She needed to clear her head. She needed a place where the suffocating weight of politics and conspiracy could not reach her. Driven by an instinct she didn't understand, she found herself leaving the city, taking the path towards the coast. She was drawn back to the place where her orderly world had first begun to unravel, the cliffside overlooking the sea, where she had first seen him intervene, a golden sun against a tide of purple uniforms. The wind was strong here, whipping her long hair across her face and tasting of salt and freedom. The endless expanse of the ocean was a calming sight, a vista of pure, untamed nature. It was a place of clarity. "It's a good view," a calm voice said from behind her. "You can see the storms rolling in from a long way off." Sarah did not startle. A part of her had known he would be here. She turned slowly. Naruto Uzumaki stood a few paces away, his hands tucked into the sleeves of his simple indigo yukata. He was no longer the pale, wounded man from her scattered reports of the shrine. He looked healthy, vibrant, the golden aura of his life force contained but palpable, a stark contrast to the gray stone and churning sea around him. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice clipped and formal, a shield against the turmoil inside her. "Same as you, I imagine," he replied, walking to stand beside her, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Trying to make sense of it all. He glanced at her, his golden blue eyes holding no animosity, only a quiet, unnerving perception. "You look troubled, General." "My state of mind is not your concern, dissident," she retorted. The title sounding hollow even to her own ears. "Isn't it?" he countered gently. "You serve a god who demands stillness. You enforce laws that punish ambition. You fight for an unchanging eternity. But you're not still, are you? I can feel it. Your heart is a battlefield right now. I'm just trying to figure out which side is winning." His directness was disarming. He didn't mock her, didn't gloat. He spoke to her as if her internal conflict was a simple, observable fact, like the color of the sky. "My loyalty is to the Raiden Shogun. It is absolute," she stated, the words a rote recitation. A prayer she was no longer sure she believed. "Is it?" Naruto asked, his voice still soft, but the question was as sharp as a blade. "Is your loyalty to the Shogun, or to her ideal of eternity? Because they might not be the same thing. And what if that ideal is hurting the very people the Shogun is supposed to protect? What does your honor demand then, Kuju Sarah?" Her hand instinctively went to the hilt of her sword. "You know nothing of honor." "I know that honor isn't about following orders, no matter how divine their source," he said, turning to face her fully. The sea wind whipped his blonde hair around his face. His expression deadly serious. "True honor is about protecting people. It's about fighting for a future where they can be safe and have their own ambitions. Your Shogun has stolen their future. Your vision hunt decree is hollowing them out, turning them into empty shells. You've seen it happen. You are a good person, Sarah. I can feel that too. So how can you stand here and tell me that serving a law that destroys your own people is honorable?" Every word was a hammer blow against the crumbling wall of her discipline. He was voicing the very questions that had been tormenting her for weeks. He saw the conflict she had tried so desperately to hide. He saw her. "You speak of protecting people," she shot back, her voice tight with emotion. "But your actions have brought nothing but chaos. You defy the Shogun's will, you incite rebellion, you sow discord. You are the source of the instability. Am I?" Naruto's expression was unpitying. "Or am I just the saint crack in a dam that was always going to break? A nation built on fear and stagnation isn't stable, Sarah. It's brittle. All it takes is one push, and the whole thing shatters." He took a step closer. "I am not your enemy. The resistance is not your enemy. The real enemy is the one who profits from this chaos, the one who whispers in your clan's ear, the one who wants this war to drag on forever. So they can pick at the corpse of Inazuma." Sarah froze. His words were too close. Too accurate. It was as if he had read the contents of her secret investigation. "What do you know of my clan?" she demanded, her voice a dangerous whisper. "I know that when a house is rotting from the inside, the most loyal person isn't the one who props up the falling walls," Naruto said, his gaze intense. "It's he one who has the courage to tear them down and build something stronger in their place. Your loyalty has been misplaced. It doesn't belong to a god hiding from her grief, or to a clan consumed by greed. It belongs to the soldiers you lead, to the citizens you've sworn to protect. They are your Inazuma. What does your honor demand you do for them?" He didn't wait for an answer. He gave her a final, lingering look. One filled not with judgment but with a profound, challenging empathy, and then turned and walked away, disappearing back down the path towards the city, leaving Sarah alone on the sea. Liftside with the roaring sea and the deafening echo of his questions. Her mind was a maelstrom. He had given a name to her enemy. The Fatui, she had suspected, but his certainty gave her theory a terrifying weight. He had also given her a new definition of honor, one that felt truer and more profound than the rigid code she had lived by. Her investigation was no longer just about uncovering corruption. It was about confirming a betrayal of the highest order. She followed the trail her audit had uncovered, a trail that led to a series of clandestine payments to a remote, supposedly abandoned reigning facility on the coast north of the city. Using her authority, she requisitioned a small skiff, telling her subordinates she was conducting a surprise inspection of coastal defenses. She arrived at dusk. The facility was anything but abandoned. Muffled shouts and the clang of steel echoed from within the main dojo. She tethered her skiff and approached with the silence of a Tengu warrior, scaling the outer wall and creeping along the rooftops until she could peer through a high, grimy window. What she saw stopped her heart. Inside, a dozen of her own samurai, men she recognized, men she had trained, were sparring. But they fought with a reckless, savage fury she had never seen. Their movements were powerful but sloppy, their eyes glowing with an unhealthy, violet light. And attached to their belts, where their God-given visions should be, were dark, metallic emblems, pulsing with a malevolent, corrupting energy. A Fatui agent, a woman with a sneering expression and the uniform of a high-ranking officer, was overseeing the training, shouting encouragement. Yes, feel the power, a gift from the Saritsa herself. Why settle for the meager scraps your distant archon grants you when you can have this? This is true strength. As Sarah watched in horror, one of the younger samurai, a boy named Kenjiro she had personally commended for his bravery, suddenly doubled over, coughing violently. It was a deep, rattling cough. And when he pulled his hand away from his mouth, it was spotted with blood. He looked up, and in the dim light of the dojo, Sarah could see his face was gaunt, aged, his skin unnaturally pale. The power was eating him alive. The Fatui officer merely sneered. Weak. The price of power is one only the strong can pay. Get him out of my sight. Two other soldiers, their own movements already showing a slight tremor, dragged the gasping, wheezing Kenjiro out of the dojo like a sack of garbage. This was the truth. This was the conspiracy. Her clan, her own father, was allowing a foreign power to arm their soldiers with these delusions. These soul-rotting parasites, they were sacrificing the loyal men of the Tenryo Commission for a sliver of borrowed power. All to further the Fatui's mysterious agenda. The betrayal was so absolute, so profound, it went beyond anger or grief. It was a cold, clarifying certainty. Naruto was right. The house was rotten to its core. Her loyalty, her honor, her very identity as a Kuju, it had all been a lie, a tool used by corrupt men. She backed away from the window, her heart a block of ice in her chest. She looked down at the emblem on her own armor. The crest of the Kuju clan, the symbol of her lifelong devotion. It meant nothing. No, it meant less than nothing. It was a brand of shame. Her path was no longer conflicted. It was illuminated by a terrible, painful light. Her honor demanded one thing now. Not to prop up the falling walls, but to be the blade that cut out the rot, no matter the cost. Kuju Sarah, general of the Raiden Shogun, was a ghost. All that remained was the warrior. And she finally knew who her real enemy was. Chapter 7 End. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.